stage. I want to welcome everyone here and also virtually. Welcome to our festival. We would like to acknowledge the First Nations as owners of the countries and their continuing connection to the land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to First Nations owners and their cultures, to the elders past and present, and emerging leaders of the future. I want to thank our brother, Brenton, for his traditional welcome to country last night. We appreciate his formal welcome and blessing from the First Nations people of this land. It's very important to us as Indigenous and Native to be welcome to the land. We don't presume to just come here and dwell. So it's really important for us to be acknowledged that way. So thank you. I would like to start first by reading a letter from the U.S. Ambassador to Australia, Caroline Kennedy. This is addressed to Anna Horsey, Chair and Director, First Nations Writers Festival. Dear festival participants, I send my warmest regards to all of those taking part in the 2024 First Nations Writers Festival. The festival has made great strides in just a short time and is playing a practical and positive role in taking stories of the Great Pacific to the world. I commend the festival organizers not just for holding the event in Townsville and presenting the annual book awards, but also for publishing works that provide insight to the region's people, culture, diversity, rich history, and current challenges and opportunities. If you want to see this and read it for you, there's a bit more, but I won't go further. We get the gist of it, and we're very honored that she took the time, Your Honor, took the time to write something. So congratulations, Anna. Well deserved. Let's go on. The way this works today is that TALKFEST work is being presented. Speakers are going to talk live. We have a live audience, and we also will eventually encourage questions from the floor as well as to our virtual attendees from around the Greater Pacific. Please join me in welcoming the founder and visionary of the First Nations Writers Festival, Anna Horsey.
Gathering, the welcome to country also from mentioning the recover last night was absolutely fantastic, and what a joy to be able to come here again here in Townsville and host the festival. So thank you everyone for coming, and I'm going to be very brief today. I established First Nations Writers Festival about 3 years ago, and so far we've published 4 books and we've had about 10 awards, and we're announcing many awards today. So we are growing exponentially, and it's such an honour to receive into First Nations and to publish these books. They are astounding. They are instrumental in sharing the stories of the Greater Pacific, and the reason we do that is because we believe those stories hum with culture. They hum with a knowledge that isn't currently being published anywhere else, and we want those works to be going around the world so everyone can enjoy them, everyone can learn, everyone can have those experiences, and they're coming in the voices of the people of the Pacific. So we're so excited about that. Thank you for joining us today. I might mention that we are a registered, regulated and audited charity, and we rely on donations and sponsorship for people to help us in our journey and help the writers. And we'd like to thank you so much for those who have sponsored us and who have made donations. Now, first of all, I'd like to call up Dr. Monty Sutar to speak to us. he has published a book, Kawa, on New Zealand. Now, he did this 2 years ago. It's a multi-award-winning international bestseller, and he is a historian, a soldier, he'll correct me, a professor, and many other activities that he's done has enriched him with the knowledge as a Maori to actually write this book, the first, if not one of the first, books written by a Maori about the long history of the Maori nation prior to colonisation. Now, it's the first of its type in New Zealand, and hence its demand for people to be able to read it and enjoy it. So we'd love you to come up, Monty, and speak to us. Yeah, come up here. Oh, half an hour, but I'll ask questions.
Hold on.
Don't forget questions from the audience. Anyone? That would be wonderful.
Roto inga ringa e tu whera atu nei ki ngā morehu o te kiwi e ki ngā tamato o tēnei riri nui hoki mai ki te waka e ngā kua tutugi te tumana kua kei te kapa mai te haki o i ngā rangi rungotia mana e. Kāti, tēnā tātou katoa, tuatai kei te mihi atu ki a Peter, nāni whakapuare tō tātou hui, me te mihi anō ki a ana, nāna tēnei hui, nāna te whakaaro, tēnā koutou katoa. In Māori, we always sing, usually at the end of our talk, so I thought to relax me, I would sing a song right at the beginning. And the song I chose was from my ancestors about a welcome ceremony. And so that's what I was singing. And I've greeted you in Māori. As Peter says, it's appropriate that we are welcome to a new place. And we feel comfortable because that's been done. And so I've acknowledged that. And I've also acknowledged Anna, who is amazing, really, to have come up with this idea, particularly not being an Indigenous person, but the whakaaro in Māori would say, but her thinking and her heart is Indigenous. So thank you very much. My wife and I are very pleased to be here among you and to meet so many people from different cultures. And in talking last night to other writers, I realized that we have something in common, that we think the same. And I've already had a look at some of your writing and realized that we write the same as well. And I think if anything in speaking today about my book, I hopefully will encourage others who are wanting to write a novel, to go from short story to a full-length novel. So I'm just going to tell you why and how I came to write this. And you people who are spiritual, you'll understand what I'm talking about when I tell you my story. So I am in New Zealand, Aotearoa. I am a historian by trade, and I write non-fiction normally. And I was employed by our government to write the official histories of whatever they deemed was important for a period of about 15 years. And my particular interest was in military history. And so, for example, in 2014, when the centenary of the First World War came up, and New Zealand, that had a big impact on New Zealand, the government got us to write a series of official histories about New Zealand's participation in World War I, and I was given the job of writing the Māori story of participation in World War I. Just so that you know how long it takes to write an official history, I spent about 6 years researching and writing that book. So you can imagine when you spend that much time, I had to go over to Europe and visit the battlefields and the places our Māori soldiers went. It's quite draining and can take quite a lot out of the writer. You all know as a writer you've got to find time when you can, and that takes time away from family and friends. And that's how I felt after 6 years, that I really needed to put some time, give time back to my family and my wife for the time I'd spent writing that. I was burnt out, I would say. So in 2019, when I finished that book, my wife and I, Tina and I, decided to go overseas and just take some time out. So we went away for 3 months. We had some friends in Greece, and that's where we were heading. Just before we left for Greece, we were in Auckland visiting our daughter. It was about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was asleep, and I felt this voice say to me, "Get roots." That's what I heard, 2 words, "Get roots." And I know throughout my life I've heard this voice before, and I knew it was something real, but I didn't understand what it was telling me to do. So I woke up and I said to my wife, I said, "Hey, I heard this voice and it said get roots." But I didn't know that it meant get the book roots. I don't know if you've ever heard of this book, but in New Zealand, and when I was a teenager, we had this television series a movie come from America called Roots. And it was written by a man named Alex Haley, and it told the story of the black people in America, how they came through slavery from Africa right up to today. So I knew it was that book it was talking about. Now in 2019, that book wouldn't be in our bookshops, at least I didn't think it would be. It was a Sunday in Auckland, and I said, "Look, we've got to get this book Roots from somewhere," because we only had 2 days before we flew out to Greece. And I said, "It'd probably be in a second-hand bookshop." I didn't know you could go on the internet and find this book. So we were driving back from Auckland to Gisborne, where we live. Remember, it's a Sunday, so our shops aren't opened, only our supermarkets and dairies. So no bookshops are going to be open on a Sunday. And we're driving through this little town. I was asleep and Tina was driving, called Pairo, and she nudged me. She said, "Hey, look, there's a Red Cross book sale on the footpath in this little town," which you'd never expect there to be anything in the town, but had this book sale on. And she said, "Shall we stop and see if that book Roots is here?" And I said, "Oh, well, give it a go." We got out of the car and we walked along the footpath, and they had these boxes from A to Z for the names of books. So I went to R, not expecting to find the book Roots, and all the books in the boxes were like that, spine down. But in the R, in fact, in all those books from A to Z, there's this one book sitting on top of all the rest. And it was like that, and I turned it over, and it was Roots. And I looked at Tina, and she looked at me, and we thought, well, that wasn't whatever I heard this morning, that was real. That's not possible, that book of all the books. It was just like waiting there for me to come and pick up. So I took it to Greece, and I started reading it. And I started to realize, this is the story of a race of people and their history of how they came to this country. And it came into my mind, I thought, maybe I'm supposed to be writing a similar story in New Zealand about the Māori journey of how they came to the country right up until today. So that's where the initial idea came from. But you see, I've never written a novel. I've never written any fiction. So I was thinking to myself, if I'm going to write the history of New Zealand, through the eyes of a Māori, because Roots is about, the story is told through one family, but it resonates with every family. So I realized that maybe I'm supposed to write the story through the eyes of one family, generations, but it would be the Māori story. And I thought about writing non-fiction, and I know how successful non-fiction books are in New Zealand. You just can't generate interest in our history if it's a non-fiction book. So I decided it'll have to be fiction. It'll be based on a true story, but it'll be fiction so that I really wanted to get the young people. And I thought a novel would be the way to do that. In fact, I was actually thinking in my mind, this is the way to get them, because they're all into images now. So I thought, maybe I'll write a fiction book that'll be turned into a movie. And you might be sitting there thinking, how audacious of this guy who's never written a fictitious story before that he could do this. But I had this idea that if the voice spoke to me and told me to do this, that it's not me, and I'm not relying solely on my ability, there's something else is going to assist me. So in France, I went to a Catholic boarding school, so I'm not a Catholic, but I did learn from the Catholics that if you... we used to have a thing called a retreat, and the school I went to was of about 180 Māori boys, and a retreat they taught us was when you can, you don't eat, and you have silence, and you read the scriptures, and you get in touch with something else. That's what we learned. 180 Māori boys, trying to keep them quiet for a whole day and not eating, that's a really hard thing to do. But I understood the principle. So in overseas, that's what I did, and I started fasting, and after about day 3, my thoughts started to become clearer. And at about day 6, because I thought I'll have a 7-day fast, I read about it, and I'd never done a fast before, but I did this, and on the 6th or 7th day, I heard the voice again, and it started telling me things, and I wrote them down. And, a lot of people ask me, well, what was the voice you heard? Was it Atua Māori? Was it a Māori source? Was it God? I don't know. I imagine, I think I know what it was, but it didn't really matter. It was talking to me, and I could feel that this thing was real. So I wrote all these things down, and I went back to see Tina, and I said, it's finally spoken to me again, and it's told me this is what we've got to do. And I had written these 3 main things down, and I said, 1, we have to sell our house in New Zealand. And 2, I have to leave work, and that means we're not going to have an income. And 3, I have to write this series called Kāwai. And, for me, it was easy for me to do all those things, but, when you own a house, you own it with another person, and my wife was not that keen on selling our house at first. But it took her a while, but she kind of believed that there's something in this. And I said, don't worry, because it told me how much the house will sell for. And she said, what's the price? And in New Zealand, you couldn't get this price where we lived. No way, it would be a miracle if you sold your house and got that price. And I said, see, so if this is me making this up, or if it's not real, the house is never going to sell. And if we don't sell the house, we don't have to do the next steps. So we came back to New Zealand, long story short. And I said, the other thing it told me to do was find the worst real estate agent in Gisborne, where we lived, and get them to sell the house for you, so that this is not you, this is a miracle. And she said to me, well, we're looking at real estate names, and she said, wouldn't the worst real estate agent be us, you and I? Let's try and sell this house. So we put it up on Trade Me. Nothing happened for a couple of months. And then one couple walked into our house off the street, asked about the house, could they have a look around, and the guy said to me on the side, he said, what do you really want for this house? And my wife wasn't there. I said, oh, what the heck? I'll tell him the price that the voice gave me. Told him that price. And he said, I'll just talk to my wife. And they were talking for about 10 minutes. And he came back and he said, yep, we'll buy it. And I was in shock. Partly in shock for the fact that somebody was going to buy it at that price, but more in shock for, okay, I've got to do the next things after this, which is leave work. Anyhow, I told my wife, and we sold that house. And I went to leave work, and my employer said, well, hang on, you really want to do this? Are you sure? You've never written fiction. You don't know how to write a novel. Do you want to risk this? And probably you as writers have heard all of this about why you can't write a book. And in the end, they persuaded me to take a year's leave without pay. And so I did that. And then I sat down in February 2020 to start writing the first book in the Kāwai series. 2 weeks after I started, because I was going to do some courses at university on how you write novels, COVID-19 hit New Zealand and we went into lockdown. So I couldn't go anywhere. And at the time I thought, this is crazy. I'm supposed to write this book, but I can't get any help. Now that I reflect, I needed to be locked down so that I could focus on what I was doing, and nobody could come visit us. You had your little bubble. And so I wrote for the first 8 or 9 months with no real guidance. Came up with about 60,000 words maybe. And I sent it to some publishers in New Zealand, told them what I was trying to do. And fortunately I got some interest from about 3 publishers, 2 of which really were serious. And then I signed a contract with one of them. And then they told me, yeah, now that you've signed a contract, those 60,000 words you wrote, that is not a novel. You've written a non-fiction history of New Zealand. You need to learn and develop your writing style. So I had to really go back and start again and rework that. And that was a bit hard when somebody tells you, you can't actually write the way you're supposed to. So I'm the type of person was, if you tell me I can't do it or you have to do it again, I'll do that. I'll just plug away at it until I figure it out. Because I thought to myself, it must be like non-fiction writing. If you keep practicing, you must get the formula in the end. And to come to the book, it starts in 1730 roughly. Captain Cook came to New Zealand in 1769. So I wanted to start before we were influenced in any way by, in New Zealand, Europeans are called Pākehā. So I wanted it to be a very Māori story, so that when I got to the book I really wanted to write about colonisation of New Zealand, the reader appreciates what we lost. What was the Māori world like, and what impact that did colonisation have? And I wanted to be truthful and honest as a historian, because our history, it's a beautiful history, but it's also there's a dark undercurrent to our past, and I had to deal with kai tangata. We call it Māori, it's cannibalism. In New Zealand, that was very common among Māori. So we would fight, and our enemies would eat them. That was the normal practice of the day. So I wanted to convey that, as well as some of the beautiful things that have happened in our society that relate to the preservation of resources, of the forests and the sea, and how beautiful the landscape was, and how we never really, as far as I can see, abused the environment. We only took from it what we needed to survive. And so it starts with a young man who is at university, and he starts asking his mother about their family. Who are they? Where did they come from? And she knows to her grandparents, but she doesn't know anything past that. And she says, but there's this old man who lives back in the home territory who you can go and ask. And so the story opens up with him visiting this old man, and the old man starts to tell him the history of his family. And then, after the opening prologue, it jumps back to 1730, and you're whisked away into another world. And I often say to people, because, they said, how did you do that? And I said, I don't know. I said, I just wrote what I felt from the heart. And I still don't know how I've actually managed to do it, but for the first maybe 150 pages of this novel, you're in another world and you get lost in it. And then at about, just over halfway, it jumps back to this old man telling the boy the story. And I'm told it's done so well that you forgot that it was a story being told. It was like you lived there. One thing I did want to do, and somebody told me, they said, if you can write every scene in this novel like you can see it on the big screen, like it's a movie, then you'll hold your reader. And I think that's what I was thinking the whole time I was writing. Can I see this playing out on the big screen? Each scene, can I feel it? Do I see it? Can I hear it? And you'll find when you read it, you get captured by it. I studied online, and I got a couple of books out of the library on how do you write a successful novel. And I learned that at about 25%, the first quarter of the book is all a setup about who the major players are in it. But at 25%, the story really starts to happen. And so, a lot of people realize that when you read this novel, you get to about a quarter way through, and all of a sudden, bang, the story changes and it's away. There's a lot of confrontational stuff in it, but there's a lot of we call it manaakitanga. That word is generosity, the spirit of the people, our beliefs. We were people who believed in many gods back then, and all of that comes through. And what I've done was, and I was talking to Baka yesterday, and he sounds like he did the same in his book, inserted a lot of our customs, traditional customs, into the book for our young people, so they realised what we used to do around funerals, for example, or around warfare. All of that is in there, and it's heavy on that sort of stuff. The end of the book is a real setup so that everybody reads the second book. So you get kind of frustrated because at the end of the book it just doesn't quite tell you what has happened. And again, I learned that's how, if you're writing a trilogy, that's what you should do. I designed, my daughter designed the cover, and I wanted it to, just as the book is, to be a very mildy look. So that's my nephew, my sister's son, who's on the cover there. We had him put a facial tāmoko on, tattoo, and that's the old style tāmoko when Cook came. And we had a few people trial out to be on the cover, but he had the look of the protagonist, and that's why he ended up there. He had no idea. When I said to him, can I put this on the cover? I said, you're going to be in all the bookshops in New Zealand, Well, the book hadn't come out, so I don't think he believed me. But I think he's regretting it now. That fortunately, it's hard to tell it's him because of the tattoos on him. And on the back, where the story takes place is below a mountain called a Hikurangi, and that's my mountain. And so I stuck that on there. It's sort of like spiritual as to who I am and where I'm from.
May I ask a question? It's not actually about that book, but you as a writer, you've written nearly all your life as a historian, which is using facts and drawing life from those facts. And then, of course, it sounds as though that's similar to what you've actually done in this novel or fiction. But going back to the first part, as a soldier yourself, and having to write about the wars that you investigated, how was that?
Well, the genre of this novel is historical fiction.
Yep.
So I always say to people, yeah, it's fiction, but it's based on a real story. And it is. It's the traditions of our people told to me when I was young, and then I've done research as well. And that's probably why, when you read it, it feels authentic. You know, people in New Zealand know the guy who's writing this knows something. He just didn't pluck it from anywhere. As a soldier, it's really helped because I've got some understanding of, well, first of all the acronyms that they use in the military. I know what it's like to be under live fire, even though, you know, that was practice for me, but I've got a sense of that. I know what comradeship is like, suffering in trenches, cold and all of that. We did all that as part of our training. So when I came to write about soldiers in World War I and World War II, I had some appreciation of what that was like. And I interviewed a lot of returned servicemen, and I think they opened up to me because they knew I had a military background and might have some understanding of what they were talking about.
Another question that First Nations Writers Festival gets asked a lot: how do we get published? And when you mention it in your speech, it sounds as though it's so easy. We obviously publish, if people want to be published, the award winners at First Nations Writers Festival. But I still get asked the question all the time, what do you have to do?
I always advise people is you need to write out some sort of plan of what it is you're trying to do, and you need some sample. Well, in terms of novel, I had to submit about 3 chapters so they could see how I wrote. I think, and I've read some of the material that some of these books I've started reading. These are hidden secrets in these books here. Something's happened in the world where readers want what's that?
Authenticity.
Yeah, authenticity, but they want the indigenous perspective of our history. They want it, but they can't get their hands on it. You know, this book took off in New Zealand because it's the only one that deals with the 18th century. There's nothing else. So, you know, I found a market that was ready for something like this. That's what I would do. I'd write down what it is you're trying to do and then give them a sample of your work, because I know I looked at those stories and I thought, if I take these back to my publisher, they would have been really interested before you got yourself a publisher. You know, I want to encourage some of you who've written short stories that you have the potential to write a novel. You know, I can just see it in the way you write. You write from the heart, and you care about the people you're writing about, and that's really, I think, what makes a really good novel is if you don't have to teach people that. And in actual fact, I don't think it's something that can be taught. It's intrinsic. All you have to learn is the writing side. But, you know, these stories that we have as Indigenous people, they're like only us have them. You know, if you've been in a place, your ancestors have been there for hundreds and hundreds of years, you're the only ones who can tell it. Nobody else has got it. Now, I know I've got no competition in New Zealand because the people who have the oral traditions, they don't know how to write. My tribal historians, and I'm encouraging them now. Hey, you need to put it down, because one of the main reasons I had in mind was I'm going to die soon or later. And what good was it that my ancestors gave me, all my grandparents, granduncles gave me all this information if I take it to the grave? And a lot of our young people today can't get access to it. We've been dispersed, not just throughout Aotearoa, New Zealand, but we're here in Australia, we're all around the world. grandmother, and they gave you all this knowledge, and to write it down, and I guess I'm struggling with sometimes some of our elders say, hey, you shouldn't write that down. It should be, still passed on the way it's passed on.
Yeah.
So I'm finding, with struggling with that, like you say, hey, all the stories, I know a lot of stories I want to write down, but then I have my elders over here saying, you shouldn't do that because that's not our way. But we have to move on into the new,
I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm a bit older than you. And I'd got to the point where most of the elders who gave me this information have all passed on. So I don't have the...
So you're the elder now?
Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking too, they're not coming to me like I went to them for the information. Those young people aren't coming. But I know as they get older, they'll want this material, and I'm not going to be around. So I thought, here, this is my gift to you, that after you can't get me, at least it's an end. I've told all my family. I've written our history in these novels. It's for you, for the future. Because I know myself, when I was young, I wasn't interested. But as I got older, I wanted to know who I was. In actual fact, the story in here of the young boy who goes to see his grandfather is me, as a 19-year-old, where I'd got to the point where I was interested. And again, that's why it sounds authentic, because the guy who's... The story here is me actually telling it. All the names have changed, and this might help you. So as not to offend the tribes who we fought against, the people we killed, or my own ancestors, I changed all the names so that it's a bit of a code. My own relatives can work out who I'm talking about. But, to the tribe, our neighbouring tribe, I didn't want to offend their ancestors, so I changed their names. They got a good idea that I'm talking about them, but if they come to me and hit me up about it, I go, well, where's the name of your ancestor in here? So that's one way of getting around it. But, I think at the end of the day, we have to write our stuff down. We can't rely on our traditional methods that young people... I don't know how it is for your people, that young people are going to come to you and learn, Yeah. And, short attention spans.
Did that voice keep coming back to you over the period that you were writing to encourage you, or did it stop?
A couple of times when I was really depressed, because you write a draft and you give it to someone to read and they say, and so you think, I put all that work into it and coming up with this. And there was the occasion when I was really wondering, did I hear that? Is this real? Am I supposed to be doing this? And it did come back to me one or two occasions. Haven't heard it for a long, long time, so I must be doing the right thing. Yes. There are days where I couldn't think of one sentence to write. And then there are other days when, woof, and I was just going for it. It just all came, in a day. And when you write something, this big, you're going to have all sorts of experiences. Writer's block, you're going to get downloads. The one thing I would encourage you to do as a writer, though, is get somebody else to read and look at your work, just to get feedback. And, every chapter in this book has got a proverb, a Māori proverb, that starts the chapter, and it gives you an idea of what the chapter's about. And there's one I wanted to leave you with, e whai mahi hira nei te moana waipu. Great things are done in deep waters. And I write that when I sign books, I write that down because if you're going to do this sort of work, you have got to venture out into the deep water. You can't stay on the shore where there's no risk. If you're going to catch big fish, we know in our society, the big fish are out there in the deep, dark, blue, black water. They're not on the shore. But once you go out to try and catch those fish, our old people, There are a lot of risks to it. But I challenge people. I said, there's something you're supposed to do in life. I've worked out this is one of them for me. And if you listen to people who don't give you encouragement or support, they're the wrong people. So when you get someone to read your stuff, find somebody who's honest, who's going to give you honest feedback, but somebody who is going to, help you on that journey.
Sorry, just before I'd like to know how your partner would have supported you in your writing.
My partner?
How would have your partner supported you in your writing? Your wife?
Yeah. That's why I brought her, because when you're married, this is not a solo effort. And, and we have at the time, our youngest child was 11 or 12. So someone looks after, keeps the house running and the family going. And almost you've got to have the permission of your partner in some ways. If you think about how I came to do this, I had to convince her that this was something that needed to be done. More than just for us, but for, I believe in New Zealand, this is a nation-building exercise where in some ways I'm educating our country on its past. And that in order to move forward, as I said, last night, Māori move forward looking backwards. And so in order to move forward, I think, we have to understand where we came from. And my acknowledgements, if you read it, I always acknowledge my wife and family, because I believe that it's, it's a team effort that gets the book done.
One final question, sorry, from one of our award-winning authors. So we
I spent some time in New Zealand, and when you were telling your stories, I could relate how New Zealand was like before the colonization. And my novel started in the 1900s, and yours started maybe 100 years prior. So how could you relate your novel to the novels of the Greater Pacific? Because in my opinion, I'm of the view that all the people of the Pacific are connected by one way or the other. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And I started reading Paul's book last night too. And it was almost like reading what I've written, but it's 100 years later. We face the same issues. He talks about the first white people to come to his country. He talks about guns, and that's what I'm dealing with in my book. So the first white people who came to New Zealand, they were traders. And they brought the musket, which was very useful for our fighting, because you could beat your enemy with the musket. And then came the missionaries and the challenges of our ancestors having so many gods, a god for the sea, a god for the forest, a god for everything. And all of a sudden, we're being presented with one God, and a God who is mightier than all your gods. And the challenge of Christianity to our people. He talks about it, and it's like I'm reading my own story, but 100 years earlier, that what happened to us. And he talks about how they saw white people, just like we did. Our ancestors saw them as fairies, as they'd come from the heavens or something like that, and that they were to be feared until we understood, no, they were human, just like us. And the irony of it, that he's Papua New Guinean, I'm Māori, but to me it's the same story. And I'm sure it's the same across the Pacific.
Well, I won't be any more than a moment. Just to say that one of the fabulous and wonderful things that the reason we're here is that Monty, who's written a novel, which I've read, and just opened my eyes to the Marination, but at the same time can read Paul's book, which we've published, which is over 100 years of history from the mythology, and he can see. Now, that's not happening. That's why we're here. That's why we're publishing these books. of these magnificent stories from around the Great Pacific. So I love you for that alone, but may I thank you and Tina also for joining us here. We know that it's a long journey, and thank you so much for joining us. But you will thank him, of course.
I think you did a good job doing that. Thank you again, Dr. Monty, for all your hard work and your mana'o, we say, your knowledge, and for sharing that knowledge, because like you said before, a lot of people are not willing to share that knowledge. And unfortunately, a lot of our elders pass without giving that or sharing that knowledge. So thank you for that. Now, I'd like to bring to the podium one of Iceland's most celebrated writers, multi-award winner for literature. He has been bestowed the Kairos Prize for outstanding individuals in intercultural understanding, fiction, children's fiction, nonfiction, and creator of such moving documentaries as Dreamland. His work has been performed and sold over 40 countries. He's the author of On Time and Water, translated by Leighton Smith. We in the Greater Pacific share literally in his most recent book, an international bestseller. It illustrates the complexity of climate change, the mythological origins, and essential reliance on the connection to nature, his family and your family, from his melting glaciers to the Pacific shores. Please help me welcome Andre Snare Magnuson.
Great to be here and get to know you all. I think many of you are the first people I meet from your countries, so I'm very grateful to get this opportunity. And and I love how I'm kind of extremely opposite on the planet from where you live, but actually proving also how we are all connected in this in these events that are happening currently on the planet. So my story is called On Time and Water. Before I had written poetry, sci-fi, short stories, children's books, fantasy, and I met a climate scientist in Potsdam, and he asked me, why don't you write about climate change? And I said, I'm not a scientist, I don't have authority. But he said, people don't understand data, they understand stories. So I started to think about this as a literary challenge, because I felt like much of the climate rhetoric was almost like on default. It was almost like it was written by AI. That is, you could almost tell when you watched a climate documentary, okay, now the palm trees are coming, now a scientist is saying this. So it's like I could almost predict exactly what would be said next time, almost like we were all speaking through a language model. We have to act now. We have 10 more years to reduce emissions. And I was thinking, there must be another way to tell this story, because this story was not cutting through. So I was thinking about like what is appropriate in terms of language and what permission I have. So the scientist said, you have to weave this into stories. And I was thinking, who defines the language of how this is told? Is it science? Is it politics? Is this business? Or is this my own story? Because I belong to this planet. So do I have permission myself to kind of appropriate my own language or my own imagination to what is happening? Of course, I can't question the science. I can question the science, but I was more supported by the science. That is, I had many leading scientists in ocean science, in climate science, in glaciology, also in marine biology. I had them supporting, so I wouldn't be saying some nonsense. But then I was thinking, who defines the language? So, for example, the word climate change. What does that mean? You know, did we call the Second World War the big change of attitude? People changed from a positive attitude towards each other into a negative attitude. Isn't this a word that is kind of diminishing how great the times we're actually living through? So when I told my friends I'm writing about climate change, they were all like, oh, here he goes again. But if I told them I'm writing about time and water, they were like, wow, that's interesting. What do you mean? And I found the challenge was in the language, and there were so many things that I could not just say. I could not take language for granted. So, for example, if a scientist says 2100, it's meaningless. Because I think all of you agree that 1970 was 30 years ago. Raise your hands. So 1970 was 30 years ago. 2050 is after 50 years. And absolutely 2100 is after 100 years. That's absolutely sure. So I was feeling like we had culturally created such a milestone around the year 2000, and we were all doing school reports imagining 2000, at least my generation, that we never kind of upgraded our sense of time. So when a scientist says 2050, oh yeah, that's very far away. So I was thinking, before I can use 2050 in the book, I have to tell a story. I have to translate what 2050, I have to translate what 2100 is. So what does 2100 mean? So I take my daughter to visit my grandmother. And my grandmother, she became 98 years old, and she was one of the coolest grandmothers that has existed. I'm a bit biased, but it's true. And she was a glacial explorer. She was in the first teams to map and navigate the Icelandic glaciers in the 1950s. So she and grandfather, they went on a 3-week honeymoon as expedition leaders with scientists, and they were 3 weeks on the glacier, and they were stuck in a tent for 3 days when a storm was raging outside, and asked them, weren't you cold? And they said, cold, we were just married. And I was 10 years old when I asked, and I was like, how do you get warm when you get married? I just didn't get, I just didn't get, I didn't really get it. So I took my daughter, or our daughter, to visit my grandmother, and she was 12 years old at the time, and my grandmother was 96. And we did a simple calculation. When do you become as old as grandmother? And my daughter takes a pen and paper, and she's like, can this be true? 2104. So she's like, we're sitting in the kitchen, and we're like, in the year 2104, she will be as old as grandmother. And then we imagine, but what if somebody, your favorite person, your favorite grandchild, somebody maybe born 2080, maybe even not a child, maybe a fully mature human being in the prime of life, maybe somebody born 2080 is sitting with you at the table and you're sharing stories with her. When is that person remembering you as her prime source of inspiration? And my daughter does the calculation. Just imagine she becomes 90, like grandmother. When are you remembered? When is someone still alive that you will love? And my daughter does the calculation, and she just shakes her head, and it's like, no, this can't be true. 2170. So the person my daughter will love the most in life, the person that she will influence the most in her life, is still out there in the year 2170. So my grandmother whispers a secret to my daughter, something that I will never know, or we will never know. I hope it's not a dark secret. It's some sweet secret from the 1930s. My daughter promises to tell nobody this secret until the year 2100, and ask that person to keep the secret until 2170. Then she can make a Facebook post or whatever. People will make. So the idea of that is to reclaim time, because we did have generational thinking before. We did not only have quarterly, annual, whatever they do in business, or 4-year terms of politics. We did have longer thinking into the future, into the past. So my idea was, the handshake of generations that my daughter has, so she can touch 1924 with her bare hands, and she will be able to reach up to 2170. So almost 250 years that she can touch with her bare hands. So the idea by putting this into the beginning of the story is to reclaim time and re-establish time. So when I say a scientist says this is happening in 2100, I don't feel like that is 80 years after Blade Runner or somewhere in the Hunger Games. I feel it's only halfway in my most intimate continuity. So the story is very much about how to write about the story. So it's almost like an experiment of how to approach something like this. So instead of putting myself on a high horse and use complicated language and say, oh, you guys, you're not maybe as well educated as me, but here's a very, very scientific word and I understand it. I go the other direction. I say, here's a word like ocean acidification. It's a word that is created by scientists. I don't understand it, but you also don't understand it. But the scientist does not understand it either, because they just found this concept in the year 2004. And a scientist, he's part of society, and he mirrors himself against society. So even though a scientist should be running around like a headless chicken, like going crazy because of the data that he has in his hands, he doesn't do that because he regulates himself against us. So actually, he doesn't understand the language until we understand it. So ocean acidification is kind of global warming's evil twin. It's about so global warming is kind of the physical element of CO2, how it kind of captures CO2 and warms the planet. But ocean acidification is kind of the chemical angle of that, how CO2 interacts with the oceans of the world and creates a drop of the pH of the ocean. So it goes from 8.1 possibly down to 7.7 within this century. And how can I say, so this is the biggest word in the world. But how can I say that a new word that nobody maybe has understood? So there was a journalist from Spain that asked me, yeah, what is this ocean acidification? What is that? And I was like, I'm just a guy from Iceland. I should not be telling a journalist from the biggest newspaper in Spain what this is. That's very alarming that I'm doing that. So ocean acidification is the biggest word in the world because this drop in the pH of the oceans is the biggest drop in the oceans for 50 million years. But it's a logarithmic scale, and how can I tell the reader that 0.4 is the most alarming number you will hear in your life? How can I do that? So 0.4, would you start crying if I said 0.5? Or if I said 0.6? So how do you unravel? Because normally words, they kind of are supposed to open up things for us, but some words are the contrary. They close things for us, and they don't really show us. So ocean acidification, that brings me to mythology, actually, because that means, or the very simplistic way of explaining ocean acidification is that when the ocean is 8.1, it has abundance of the material for shell-building animals. So it has an ocean that wants to build shells and want to build corals. An ocean that is 7.7 is an ocean that wants to dissolve corals and shells. So it's a completely different ocean. Instead of an ocean that wants to build corals, it's an ocean that wants to dissolve them. So it's not the same ocean. So to have this change in a single lifetime, that is the biggest change in 50 million years, that means that only my daughter or our children or people that are in university now, they will experience a bigger drop in the pH of the world oceans than not only all the ancestors of man, that is, if man is 300,000 years old, not only all the ancestors of the Homo species, if man is 5 million years old, but 10 times the evolution of humanity. And we can maybe see in the museum what we were 50 million years ago. I have some kind of a raccoon. I don't really know what we were. So this means that we are in a paradigm shift. That is, we are in an era that is not like any era before. But at the same time this is happening, that same human being will see a greater rise in the sea level than people have seen for 6,000 years. And we are seeing a greater change, a more rapid change in the glaciers. So one glaciologist can see in his lifetime something that people could only measure in maybe 15 lifetimes before. So what I'm saying is that not only language fails us, but I'm asking also what language is appropriate to talk about these times. So that's how I go into mythology, because history is about historical events, kings and battles and trade routes and historical events. But mythology is kind of creation stories, end stories, when somebody was dragging the sun over the sky, or when God separated the waters, or all these mythological stories.
Sir, you're talking about the glaciers melting and stuff, and water is rising, you know, and we're talking about ancestors, and when it came down to it, you know, God loved said that he never flood the world, but he would send fire. But do you think that the fire is not fire that we think of as burning the earth, but the glaciers melting and the water depleting, and that's fire itself?
So I actually write about fire in the book, because we are living, so we can ask ourselves why this is all happening. And that's where we go down to Prometheus, because Prometheus stole the fire from the gods and gave it to humans so we could build our civilizations, but the god punished him by an eagle that gnawed out his liver. That's in Greek mythology. And that's apparently quite annoying to have your liver gnawed out. But the gods thought we could not control fire. In the last 300 years, after the steam engine, we started to hide the fires. So I have not seen fire today.
So actually, you know, so we were talking about when God said that he's going to destroy the earth with fire. Do you think that the gamma rays coming from the sun, and, you know, you're starting to have all this, way down south, you're starting to see the aurora borealis, or whatever, however they call it, you know, the northern lights. Further south, you know, my thought is, you know, it might not be fire itself, but fire from the sun that's hitting the earth, that's causing this borealis, you know, northern lights that's disrupting the earth.
Yeah.
Do you think that might be God's intention to say, we think fire as, you know, he's going to burn up the earth, but actually the fire is coming from the sun now. We're in that time where you know, the gamma rays are hitting the earth, and it's causing all this disruption amongst the earth, all these things that we've never seen before. Do you think that is the fire, that we're misinterpreting it as burning up the earth, but actually that fire is coming from the sun, and we're living in that time now?
I've spoken to scientists, and what we are doing is that we have volcanoes in Iceland, for example, and we always think the mountains and the volcanoes are bigger than us. So we had a volcano in 2010 that stopped the air traffic in Europe. It was called Eyjafjallajökull. And we could measure the emissions from that volcano. It was like 150,000 tons per day of CO2 that came out of the volcano. Human emissions...
Just give us a contrast to the 150 to, I don't know, something else. How big is that?
Yeah, so 150,000 tons per day compared to human emissions, that is all our industries and cars and homes, that's like 100 million tons per day. So if you divide 100 million with 150,000, you get the magic number 666. I'm not trying to be mystical, but that's just the fact. So human emissions, the fires that we have ignited in our factories, in our homes, are like 666 of these volcanoes. And then if you speak to any geologist, when did the Earth last have 600 volcanoes blasting for 50, 60, 100 years? He'll just do like, so the fire from the sun, even though the sun increases by 10%, what we are burning every single year is we are burning captured, because the plants they capture the sunlight and that turns into oil. So we are burning like 1 million summers every single year of energy that came from the sun. So even though, so I've spoken to lots of scientists because I was thinking maybe it's beyond our control, but actually we have tapped into a resource where we burn 1 million summers to our benefit, or we thought to our benefit, but now we've found out that it's actually not. It is, so nature is now kind of crumbling from this strength. So in my book, I'm trying to kind of find new metaphors to talk about this issue. So I'm using my grandmother as a timeline. So she has 100 years, and what it means to be living in a time when the fundamentals are shifting. That is because we are living with the first human leaders that actually believe that we are melting glaciers, or know that we are melting glaciers. We're living with the first leaders since Noah or Moses that thought they could raise the oceans or change the ocean levels. We're living the first leaders that actually can discuss how they can change the seasons or amplify tornadoes or hurricanes. But we don't really see it. So we don't really see how that is fundamentally different from a traditional peace negotiation or a trade negotiation or a war over a border. How fundamentally different it is to be living when these fundamentals are shifting, and how that challenges all our values, our ways of business, our ways of life, our ways of thinking for the last 200 years. And I think that's why people are very much looking to the indigenous ways of thinking, because we have found like the way of thinking for the last 200 years has failed us, and people are really looking for metaphors, they're looking for stories, they're looking for explanations, ways of life, or even for a lost connection to nature that people are hoping to re-find again, because people have found out that it's not only about a technical solution to this or reducing emissions, it's also about maybe even finding holiness again in nature, because every single generation of our ancestors saw something sacred in nature, but we decided that we could only measure things and define if it was, and find out that through our 1 meter stick that things were not holy or not. So we kind of lost also the ability to have respect. And the ancient tribes, they said, don't go there because something terrible will happen. But then they took their stick and they said, I can't measure anything there, so why should I be cautious? And then somebody said, don't take that mountain, something terrible will happen. But they took their stick and they said, I can't measure anything there, so we'll take the mountain. And now something terrible is happening. So
Another thing, that I truly believe is like culture is, we should share culture, And I think that it was brought by the Europeans that say, hey, we can't write this stuff down. We can't share our knowledge because it's taboo. It's not a good way for us to share these old traditions. But I think we're moving past that, and we're able to write all these things down, and it's not taboo. It's something that the Europeans taught us that, hey, we shouldn't share this knowledge because we shouldn't write it down because, it's bad. And, they taught us that in our mentality that, we shouldn't put this stuff out there because it is bad. But actually, it is good. But they just, at the time, we're moving on into the future. And that was the old ways of the oppression,
Yeah.
Hey, we don't want you to tell these stories because we want this to be lost to history. We only want you to know our way and only want you to read what we write down. But now that indigenous people are starting to read and write, we're starting to write down these stories, and it's a good thing because now we can see two different sides of history, two different sides of humanity.
I wrote my book in Icelandic, and I write in Icelandic, and that's a language only spoken by 350,000 people. But in Icelandic we have a parallel kind of oral tradition, or had through the centuries an oral tradition and a written tradition. So the oldest written texts in Icelandic are written in 1100. And the language hasn't changed, so we can read the stories that were in the same language as it was almost 1,000 years ago. But in the history also, when I studied, when we were taught geography, folklore and science would be complementing each other. It was not seen as contradictory. So they would show you a big rock, and they would tell you, oh, this is the troll that was eating a priest on his way to his lover on the other side of the mountain. But then he was too late, and the sun came up, and he turned into stone. So that's why he has his name, this big rock. But actually, it's a basalt thing that came up through a crack, and the rest of the land eroded around it. So it wasn't said, this is the wrong story, but this is the right story. It was more like the story complemented the other. So when I'm writing my book, I'm using mythology because I just feel like it makes these things more interesting. And it actually makes an explanation that is easier to understand. And then in the end, we are living mythological times. Because when you're living times when nature leaves geological speed and enters human speed, these are times that will be remembered after 1,000 years and after 3,000 years. Because people will remember this generation was there, the first generation that measured this, the first generation that understood it.
You were talking about that rock that came out.
Yeah.
Can you imagine thousands and thousands of years ago, your ancestors, seeing that rock eventually come up, and be where it's at now. All these stories, they're in legend, but then they're also in fact, because our ancestors, your ancestors might have seen that rock, slowly rise and rise and rise and rise.
Yeah, there are lots of stories that are explaining things like that. So the idea is also will this era be called global warming after 3,000 years, or will it be called the Great Fire, or will it be called the Great Disruption? Will it be called the Big Water Crisis? Because every single element of water on our planet is simultaneously being disrupted. That is, the glaciers are going down, the sea levels going up, the pH levels are being disrupted, the storms, the rain, the snow, and also even the groundwater, for example, which is the challenge for the Pacific Islands, is the rising sea level will infiltrate the fresh water and make places uninhabitable, possibly due to a freshwater crisis. So all these things, if only one of these things were happening, if only the glaciers were melting, if only the planet was warming, or if only the ocean acidification was happening, each and every one of these would call for an immediate rethink of policy and everything that we're doing. But I'm also writing about in this book is how long does it take to understand an issue? How long did it take from women asking to vote in Iceland, for example, until we had a woman president or an equal parliament? It took like 100 years. How long did it take from the word democracy to be introduced as just translated from French to Icelandic until we had democracy? That was like 100 years. How long did it take for us to go from the Nordic gods to start kind of understanding the Christian gods? It was a transformation of about 100 years. But the problem now is that we don't have 100 years. So I'm very honored to be in your presence and to be in this. Is there a question?
Lobby a politician or you stood in front of impressionable people. Do you have a page from your book that a favorite part, an excerpt that you really could read for us?
The part that I use for the politicians is kind of the most simple one, which is the one that I told you about, the handshake of generations, to get them to think that what they're doing now is influencing directly somebody that, a child here, like the child that just came in, she's going to be around in the year 2110, easily. No, even further. Yeah. 2110. If she runs for president as old as Biden, she might do that 2110. So I frequently use this kind of this time reference. Yeah, that was a very extreme example of writer's block. So I had gathered all this information. I could tell the stories, but I just didn't know how am I going to write this. So I thought, why don't I just skip the middleman? Instead of hoping that the president will read the book, why don't I just become president? Yeah. So I recommend it. If you have a writer's block, run for office. Yeah. Thank you. I think the next one is on stage. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrea, from First Nations as well. I know Peter's representing it. Magnificent book, if anyone would like to read it.
Thank you, Andre. Thank you for your insightful vision and for taking that leap. It's amazing, what you were talking about, and climate change is a real thing, but there's still people that don't believe it's real, and some of them reside in the United States of America, so that's unfortunate. They're probably, yeah.
What do you call them? They're yellow. That's a new color we're going to have to add to the black, red, yellow, white.
Without further ado, I'd like to bring to the podium renowned actor and director, word warrior, activist, public speaker, collaborating creator of the docudrama Zach's Ceremony. He's a member of the FNWF Ohana, the family. Hailing, it gives me great pleasure to introduce my brother, Alec Domaji.
And I wasn't late. I'm running on blackfella time. Time is irrelevant. Do you want me to use the mic? Is the mic? Oh, just there? I got you. So my name is Judd Bagala. That's my proper name in my tribal tongue. Judd Bagala is the wedge-tailed eagle, the visionary for my people. Up in the lower Gulf of Carpentaria, which is about 2 days' drive that way, you'll come to the biggest salt flats in Australia, the sacred salt flats of the Ganggalida people. So through the Ganggalida tribe, I am bloodline relatives to my grandmother, Naina, who was the Barramundi dreaming. So the Barramundi dreaming of the Ganggalida people in the lower Gulf of Carpentaria. That's where I come from. My mother was born from that lady, the Barramundi Dreamin'. And people don't know this, but we were also in our grandmother's womb, because your eggs develop in your mother when you're inside the womb of your grandma. So I carry the blood of my grandmother, Naina, the Barramundi Dreaming. And the Jadbagala, or the Jadbragala, you got to roll that tongue a little bit, Jadbragala, is the bird that is the greatest and most powerful bird of prey in the Gulf of Carpentaria, if not Australia. But it is also the biggest eagle in the world, outdoing the American eagle. Hey, oh, 2 times over. Yeah. But I want to say that the reason I was bestowed the name Jadbagala was because I'm the visionary for my people. I see the future for my people. And the Jadbagala is the only bird that can fly above the storms, the cyclones, and the rains in the lower Gulf of Carpentaria, and actually go to such an altitude that all the ugliness and all the crabs in the bucket and all the people that hold on to you and drag you down, they fall off. And that's what's been happening to me for a long, long time. I got to fly and soar above all the ugliness. I never give up. That's why I wear the Pamalwai T-shirt. If you don't know who Pamalwai is, he was the rainbow warrior. He was from the Bidjigal people, and he was the first resistant of this country. He was the man that fought the Redcoats and fought against Governor Arthur Phillips for 11 years. That man right there, right? See him there? Yeah, see. Google him. Read about him. Read about the book. Pick up the book, Pamalwai, the Rainbow Warrior. It's an amazing book. There's one thing I forgot to mention last night in my speech was give you some advice on some books you should read. There's one called Palm Island, which Joanna Watson wrote about Palm, gives you the story behind the resistance of that, and one about my brother and the death in custody of Cameron Doomadgee called The Tall Man, which was written by Chloe Hooper. So I suggest you pick up those books and have a read of them, and they'll give you a little bit of example on, I guess, what my family's been through. But the Pamalwai, the Rainbow Warrior, when I first moved to Sydney back in 2008, I followed my heart. I chased my wife, who, by the way, is a white woman. She's white. Her father is Dutch, and her mother is British. So she's the whitest woman in Australia. She went from Amy Vanderspoel to Amy Doomadgee. From the whitest name to the blackest name. You can't get no black than Doomadgee. I carry the name Doomadgee wherever I go. My grandfather was a big warrior for our people, and when the missionaries first came out to the Gulf of Carpentaria, even though they were there to save and civilize us savages in a brutal way, the Brethren Church, the fundamentalists from the deep south of America, my grandfather still saw humanity in them and helped them find water and led them to where Doomadgee is today. That was my grandfather, old Bingaruweed, old Stanley Doomadgee, very powerful warrior man. I carry his blood in my veins too, and I'm very proud of that. So my name's Jadbagala. I'm from the Wanyagara and Ganglida tribes. That's 3 different tribes. But I'm also from the Gamarangi skin group that gives me my Moiti group within my family, and the Wheelia clan, which is the Dingo blood, and the Mumbalia clan, which is the Rainbow blood. I want to state this very clearly because I'm announcing myself to the spirits and the ancestors of this country for which we stand, so they know who I am and they know why I'm here. I'm the visionary, but I'm also the black cockatoo, right? The red-tailed cockatoo is the messenger bird. It brings the message. And my message is one of hope, one of humanity, and one of unity. Because I've seen what division does, and I've seen what ugliness of coming up against each other does. And I believe the arts can help us break down these barriers and climb the walls that we need to find ourselves and to find peace in each of our homelands. I hear my white brother Obi from Iceland talking about water and how important water to you. You know what I've just done for the last 10 years? I've been the chairman or the president of the Wanyi tribe, So I'm bloodline relative to the Wanyi through my grandmother, but I'm also adopted into the Wanyi tribe through my stepfather, Old Dungomaji. Old Don George was a very big lawman for our people. And the last 3 years, I've been fighting against a company called Santos. Santos is the biggest gas company in the Southern Hemisphere. They dig for gas, and guess what they ruin when they're down there? The water, the aquifers. Now, up in the lower Gulf of Carpentaria, where I'm from, the Budjimala National Park and up through Burketown and Doomadgee is the biggest gas basin in the Southern Hemisphere. More gas down there, it's called the super gas basin. And guess what else is up there? The aquifers that feed down through the rest of Australia, down to the Darling River, down to the Murray River, where all the farmers and all the white people all have to feed and feast. Now imagine if that water gets poisoned by what Santos is doing, what will happen to Australia and what will happen to our industry. The only resistance that was between them and that gas was me. They're looking at him. And they removed me about a month ago. The government, the system, removed me from being the chairman or the president, democratically elected under the current system that is the native title legislation, to fight against such atrocities in my backyard. You see what I'm saying? And you know why I'm here? To bring you the truth. That's some truth right there for you. The only reason I was removed as the chairman and the president of my people is because big business seen me as a problem and as an issue and as a thorn in their side. Now they'll tell you in the media and they'll tell you in all the books that, oh, he didn't adhere to our whitefellow law under the ORIC rules. He was giving out too much money to his people without going through the proper protocol. You know what the proper protocol is? If they need it, they get it. If there's a funeral, I'll pay for it. If someone's in hospital and sick and our elders are dying, they'll get it from me. I don't give a shit about your laws and rules. I live under tribal law, under my law. Show me your contract or your accord or your treaty with me to adhere to your bullshit native title and also your ORIC rules. This country, there's a secret war going on here, and it's hidden behind all these rules and laws that the white man decides to put in front of you. I'm here to bring the message, I'm here to bring the truth, but I'm also here to speak about the arts, on how we can use the arts to better our lives. Like Brother wrote the book, like Sister come all the way from Fiji, the book she wrote, like what you're talking about with water in your country and the ice melting. What you're saying in your book, I'm saying in my tongue, in my words. I'd like to write a book about why they removed me. I'd like to write a book about some of the deals I've struck on behalf of my people that nobody ever did in their lifetime. I created a blueprint for my people to have independence and financial independence at that. They don't want me to be free. They want me to be in a cage. They wanted this eagle to stay in the cage so they could keep me in check. So every time I step out of line, hey, we better get back in here. They made a big mistake, though. On the 16th of April, they released me from that cage when the white administrators moved in and told me that they were going to remove me as the chairman and remove my entire board. And again, we were democratically elected by our people under the native title legislation. How can one do that? How can you come and remove a people that was elected by their own people? How about if I move to, let's say, I don't know, South Africa somewhere, and go to one of their tribes and say, we're removing your president today. South America, going to Colombia, hey, we're going to remove your president today because we don't think he's doing the right thing. How would that go down? Wouldn't go down too well, would it? But it happens here every day. Last year, while they were distracting you with the referendum, telling you we're going to give Aboriginal people a voice in this country with this referendum, they systematically shut down 300 Aboriginal corporations across this country through the legislation that is known as native title, through the very, very regulatory body known as the Office of Indigenous Registrations in Canberra. Google it, have a look. How much Aboriginal corporations and Aboriginal people across this country was disenfranchised, was disempowered, and left to be living in abject poverty again. So that's why I've come here today, and I've come up here to take my sister Anna's invitation to speak my truth, to hopefully look at how we write books about this, because I too want to be like the great Winston Churchill. I too want to write my own history. If that white man can stand in front of history and go, history will be kind to me for I intend to write it, it's going to be kind to me too, because I'm going to keep my narrative and I'm going to write my narrative and I'm going to write my truth that happened to me, my lived truth. And this country can lie all it wants, and they can pretend that they want to talk treaty with us, they can pretend they want to talk truth-telling, but the very people, some of them are in the arts industry, the gatekeepers I call them. You know, there's black fellas that are in the house and there's black fellas that are outside the house. And I think Malcolm X said it best, and I'm going to not use his words because I don't want to offend anybody out there, but Malcolm X said there's house blacks and there's field blacks. The fellows that live in the house, they look after their house master and they want to make sure his house. And if you burn down the master's house, he goes, "Oh, look, master, they're burning down our house." And then there's the field ones. I'm out there in the field picking cotton. Well, that's me. I'm out there with them, and I want to burn that house down. I don't just want to burn it down. I want to actually rebuild it from its foundation so it's equally shared by all of us. And it's only then that we can speak about equality, and it's only then we can speak about sharing each other's meals. And, you know, the Smorgasbord of Australia, it's quite a big one. This country in this part of the world is very rich in resources, very rich in finances. In fact, back in 2008, I don't know if you know this, but when the global financial crisis hit, remember that? The GFC? When that happened, the Australian dollar went through the roof. And I believe we have a place to play in that, I guess, in the global economy. We have a place to play in the way we behave. We have a place to play with how we use our arts. So, you know, I want to thank you all for being here. I'm really honored to be here amongst you, and I'm certainly happy to share my stories with you. But I believe arts is our way forward. I believe the greatest change have come from arts, have come from writings, have come from books. I still read books. I read some of the books that have gotten me here to be able to speak to you in such a manner. I want to read my brother's book here because I want to know about your country. I want to read my brother's book over here because I want to know about Iceland. In fact, I'd love to come to Iceland and tell my story and actually write a book about us hanging out together. Who knows? I might have some Viking blood in me. Huh? I might be Ragnar or something. So, you know, I'm here today to basically speak my truth and hopefully get an opportunity to write our stories. And like I said last night, I want to work with Anna about hopefully publishing Zach's ceremony as a book for kids, so I can inspire kids in the schools to go out and seek their culture, to seek their knowledge, and to participate in these kind of discussions. I'll say thank you all very much. In my language, Maragani, an honor to be here. Are we going to get Brother Wopila up here? So I might quickly introduce you to a brother of mine from the Lakota Nation. He's named Wopila Badhand, but I'll get Brother Peter up here to get him up here, and they can introduce him. But thank you all very much. I'm around all day. You can come have a chat with me.
We can hold this up.
Thank you, Brother Alec. Amazing. Very, very. He's very charismatic, and it's great because he reminds us why we're here, and Anna's vision on telling our stories. And the great thing, one of the things that drew me to this organization is that it allows us to tell our stories and not allowing other people to tell our stories. Because a lot of times history is not correct. And it's told by a third person. This is coming straight from the voices of the people. And that's very important. And so I want to remind everyone that you can buy the books online, or you can come here and purchase some books. Without donations, we cannot make this happen, because Anna's just been working so hard to make everything happen. So we need you to donate. We want to thank Regis as corporate sponsor. They've been so great and very gracious to host us. And without further ado, I want to present. He's a present-day shaman, a seer, healer, a registered member of the Lakota Nation. His land spans the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota. His legendary Native American family of the Red Leaf Clan, they're famous, world famous. My brother, Wopila Badhand.
So first of all, the first thing I want to say is, don't sign that treaty. Don't get a treaty, you know. My great-grandfather was one of our war chiefs, and he was actually a treaty signer in the 1868 treaty. When we signed the treaty with the United States government, and my grandfather, he marked his great-grandfather, he marked his X, saying, you know, we will no longer take war with white man. We'll put down our bows and our arrows. Guess what? We defeated them with bows and arrows. And they had the greatest technology in the world. But yet, we still had Creator. Creator led us in the greatest victory, you know, in the world, you know. We defeated the United States government, the 7th Cavalry, through a vision that Sitting Bull had, he prayed to the Creator and he asked the Creator, hey, we're having a difficult time, And the Creator gave him this vision, that we were going to defeat 7th Cavalry if we just held to our traditional beliefs. And we did. But then the Creator also told us, you don't do certain things. Don't take no war trophies from these white fellas, But our people did. And so that's how we settled on the reservations, is the Creator gave us great insight. But we didn't listen to him. And I'm very, very thankful that I come here, and to talk about culture. And I'm very proud of all of my indigenous brothers, my human brothers. At the end of it, we need to get away from looking at the color of our skin, where we come from, because, hey, this is not a way of thinking, This is not native to anywhere, Not even to this world. We have to start looking at each other's hearts. What comes to the hearts? And I'm glad that you guys are starting to write down, things. Look at these beautiful, beautiful paintings. Look at these beautiful people. And that's each and every one of us. As human beings, that's all of us. Even this flag here, all these roses and these teepees. Hey, that's all of us here. We're a nation within a nation. Peaceful, honorable nation. And, at the end of it, we're starting to tell our stories. We're starting to write it down, and it's coming from Native people's perspective, not from somebody else's perspective of how we should live our life and how life is dictated, but from our own human perspective of our ancestors, And it's good that it started to be written down because, a lot of our stories were just oral stories, and that's the old ways. So like I was asking a fella, what do you think about, our ancestors saying that we shouldn't write this stuff down. It should be only this way. And we're in an age where we have to come about it. We have to make that change for our people because our people are stuck so much in the past that they say, hey, you can't do this. You can't write that down. And that's the European way of thinking. It's not our way of thinking as human beings because they tried to oppress us so much that they didn't want these stories to be written down. They didn't want it to be passed on and for our future generations to learn these things. But it's good that we start to do these things because, our future generations we're in a very troubled time, Our young ones will sit there on a phone rather than sit and listen to our elders. And all of you are making that change for that future. And I'm very proud of each and every one of you for writing these stories down because, hey, these stories, eventually, they're not going to be written down in a book, but they're going to be right here in the palm of our hand, with that phone. And so you guys are making that change to write these stories down on paper. Eventually, somebody's going to take your leadership and they're going to move it into the next generation where, hey, it's going to be at the palm of our hand. And guess what? That's how we're going to reach our younger generations, is by the palm of our hand. Long time ago, we extend our palm of our hand by shaking each other's hand. That was an old way. Now the new way is our palm of our hand is through technology, through that phone. So that's a new way of extending our handshake, our heart through a palm of our hand, So I went walking on the beach and I was thinking, what am I going to talk about, I know nothing in life, I'm very young, but everything that I know in life was from my ancestors. Everything that I can talk about was from my elders.
And that's why I'm here in front of you right now is because of our elders. Because of each and every one of you, we're going to make this change in the world. And I truly believe that, all of us, the Creator brought us here for a reason. There's not just no reason why we're standing here. Because I can say, how in the heck did I come all the way to Australia from a poor little Indian boy on a reservation in South Dakota, But my grandparents taught me our language. They taught me my culture. And I was very, very proud of that. That's why I wear these eagle feathers with pride, And each and every one of us, sometimes I went around the world and they said, I wish I had a culture like you. I wish I had pride like you. I said, you do. I said, each and every one of us, we came from somewhere. We have grandparents and they came from somewhere and they came from somewhere. You go and learn that and pick that up and be proud of that, Not only just be proud because I wear feathers, each and every one of us, we have, the Creator didn't just throw us on this world for nothing, He threw us here for a purpose. And each and every one of us in this room, we have a purpose, and that's why we're here today. We're going to move our future generations into the future. Because, hey, I'm not that old, but I can still read. Not that good, but I can read. But nobody reads books anymore. So now it's our mission to, like I said, extend that palm of our hand to the palm to these young people and put it out there in the internet and all these things. So these young people, can have it in their palm and then extend that palm to other people. So we're not only extending an old handshake, we're extending our palm to the younger generations. More or less, each and every one of us, we have a phone. Except for me, my phone don't work here, so I leave my phone, over there. But I went for a walk today, and I sat there on the beach, and I was thinking, Creator, give me insight. What am I going to talk about, I'm not a writer, but here I am, and, learning from each and every one of you, and I'm very, very proud of you guys that you're telling these stories from your people, because it has to be written down. It has to come from indigenous people, because there's no stories out there. Nobody's going to tell our story, unless we do. So with that, I thank you, and, you guys are doing great things, and I'm really proud of you, Keep on pushing forward. Thank you.
I know it's me again, but I have to say that, and you can read about it in the book when you buy it. I have had the extraordinary privilege to read all the short stories and the manuscripts as they go through the process after the judges have read them and said, yes, these books and short stories should get awards. They're what we're doing. Everything is in the voice of the people. We don't change it. Barker Bina, who's going to have some comments this afternoon, wrote a fabulous piece. He said, this is how the mainstream publishers want a story. It's got to have a beginning, maybe it's the 25%, and then it's got to have a middle, which has got a lot of complexity, and then it has a big bang at the end. And certainly that's true, and I confess I read some of those books. But Barker said in the Pacific, and indeed First Nations might start in one spot, then they wander over there, then they wander to another place, and then they wander somewhere else, and then you get to the end, and it might take a bit of time for the extraordinary story to seep through your bones and your genes, and it's powerful. It's just a different way of telling a story. This wonderful book of Paul Perini, as all our books are, but this in particular, this book is a powerful story of a creation of a new tribe with new people coming together in the highlands of Papua New Guinea. I've read this book 5 times because I actually am the line editor of the book, but for very good reasons. The first time I read it, it was just enthralling. I didn't do any editing at all. There was only a few small places. And I've read it again and again because it takes you to a time pre-colonisation and then post-colonisation and the embracing of some, not all, of the colonised structures and taking those with him to create a brand new country. Now, this gentleman is the uncle of Paul Purini, and he writes a memoir about him from his own experience and from discussions, so it's observation, discussions, and the history from his great-grandmother and so forth. So it's powerful, and it gets back to what Monty's been speaking about, and also the connection of family that Andre has been speaking about, and it brings you to the modern day. So I would like to invite him up here. We launched this book last night, by the way, in both soft cover and hard cover. They are available for purchase online, and I highly recommend it, as I do all the books that are here, all the speakers that are here today. So, Paul, would you mind coming up and telling us a little bit about why you chose, I mean, I know, not just because I've read it, but why you chose to write this memoir about your uncle? There you go. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Anna. Good day, everyone. Good daily blogger. Kia ora, everyone. It's greetings in different languages. I'm saying kia ora because I spent some time in New Zealand and I learned kia ora. And good morning, good day, everyone. It's our common language, talk pitching in Papua New Guinea, and good day to you all in English. All right. All right, before I proceed, I would like to take this time to acknowledge some of the award-winning, the senior authors that we have in this room. I myself, I may be a speck in an ocean as far as my novel is concerned, but I believe in the years to come, I will learn a lot of things from the senior authors who are in this house. And furthermore, I would like to acknowledge the indigenous landowners of this land in which this building is standing. All right, thank you. All right, just a little background. I'm not a writer. I have a different profession, which is I'm a lawyer by profession. But what motivated me to write? All right. I write legal novels. Like basically I write arguments, legal arguments. But what motivated me to become an author? All right. It all started back 18 years ago. That was in 2005 to be precise. In 2005, when I was doing my second year at the University of Papua New Guinea, I went back to the village. All right. My village is located in the islands of Papua New Guinea. That's the interior of Papua New Guinea. All right. I went home, and, well, although I'm not a writer, I'm a good listener. So I can listen. It will take me, if it takes 2 or 3 days, yes, I will spend those days and I will only listen. So if you're a good listener, then finally you'll be a good writer as well, because they complement each other. So that's one thing that I found out. All right, it all started. So at that time, my grandmother, who was living at that time, that was in 2005. I don't know when she was born, but she told me in 2005 that she witnessed the First World War. So if the First World War started in 2014, then I believe She must be a teenager at that time. So she told me all the stories that happened in 2014 up to the time where she met my grandfather, Mr. Nee. She tells me all these stories. And then all those stories captured my interest. And then not only that, but every time in 2005, 2006, 2007, when I went home, I didn't go to my parents. I went all the way to my grandmother, and she would tell me all your stories. Well, she told me all her stories, but then I had a feeling that something must be done. And that's where I started writing everything that she told me. The reason why I wrote down all those stories is oral history, the flavor and the taste gets fade away as time passes on. For example, if I told my brother sitting there that I am black and white, okay, he might go out and say, Mr. Nee says he's black, white, and green. Now he's adding green, I didn't tell him. And someone else might say, okay, Mr. Nee told that person that he was black, white, orange, and green. So he's adding two versions. That's how the flavor of oral history fades away as time gets by. That's why I was of the view that that must not happen. And then I started writing things down. So what's going to happen is, if history is written down, then we have a precise history that is written down. So even time passes on, nothing will be changed. Our sons and daughters of the later years will appreciate what happened in the past because we have a concrete inscription of what happened in the past. And this is testament in the books that we write. So fast forward. If you read the history of Papua New Guinea gained independence in 1975. So prior to that, we were colonized by this country, Australia. Well, Papua New Guinea was colonized in Australia. Obviously, they introduced their systems of government. And we were governed by the Australian colonial administrators called the Luluwais, the Tultulwais, and the Kalps at that time. And my grandfather, Mr. Paraka, was a little boy at that time, in 1950s. So what happened was, prior to that, I didn't tell this story, so I think I feel compelled to tell this story. My grandfather, Mr. Nee, is my grandmother Ringem's second husband. But prior to that, she married another man. But during a tribal warfare, the enemies from the neighboring tribe went and attacked the village in which my grandmother's first husband was from. So she left that village, she came and married my grandfather, Mr. Nee. So when she went there, she met another woman by the name of Rongo. So Rongo was my grandmother's cousin. So they would go meet up with other women of like-minded, and they were forming what is called a courtship in the night. So courtship is a sing-sing, or it's kind of a gathering in which all the young men and young women would meet, and they would sing songs, and then eventually the lovebirds would meet the partners, and they would go out and get married. So that's courtship. So that happened. Up in Highlands. That happened. And it was during the courtship my grandmother met my grandfather, Mr. Nee, because Mr. Nee was a warrior back then, and all the neighboring people feared Mr. Nee. So they got married, and they had their first son, which is my uncle and the protagonist in this character. I provided this story to a photo to Anna, and she was the one who made a design and everything. So Anna, thank you for the design and everything for this book. So everything was done by Hannah. So that design and everything that we see here, it was done solely by Hannah. I didn't do anything. I only provided the title and the photos, and everything was done by Hannah. So Hannah, thank you again for this. So, yes. So how it all happened? So back then, when Paraka was born, he was the firstborn. And then second was my father. And then the third, there's another Hangul, and then I have 7 uncles who were born from my grandmother. So when they were all born, my grandmother was of the view that Paraka would inherit our traditional welfare and our traditional ways of doing things. That was my grandmother's wish. But when Paraka was brought up, he was brought up at a time when the Australian colonial administrators and the Australian missionaries first came and set foot in my land. So they brought the educational system and the religious system. So Paraka, when he was growing up, he was on a crossroad as to which idea he would adopt. He appreciated the Australian introduced concepts, but then he was holding back his traditional values. And he appreciated both, and he became someone. And that's how Paraka grew up. When Paraka was born in, I'm just running down on what the book is all about. So Paraka was born in 1939, but prior to that, when you look at the time difference between Paraka and the Queen of England born maybe somewhere in 1920, so there was a 20 years difference. So when PNG fell under the colony of Australia, well, commonly we were Australia, PNG, we all adopted the British concept of government. So the Queen indirectly had an influence in Papua New Guinea at that time. So most of the things that we did, our form of government and everything as it is captured here, are very much to do with the British influence as well as Australian influence. That's all captured in this book here. So the reason why, like I have stated, the reason why I decided that this book should go into print, well, I've tried this book many times. I've read the manuscript over and over, and I was thinking that it would not make a book. I started in 2020. I read the book through, and to myself, I was writing all the chapters here and there, and then when I put all the chapters together, I was of the view that this might not make a book. And I myself, I didn't trust my book too. And I gave it to someone else to read it. And when that person read it, he said, "No, Paul, you put all the pieces together, and it looks like it will be a good book." So that's the time I realized that you don't know how potential you will be until you put things together, and then you will come up with a success in the end. That's how I found out. So, yeah, well, that's a brief history of what the book is all about. Yeah.
He's been starting where he did all that time, almost 100 years, from your grandmother's story right through to the other end. Sadly, he passed. He had multiple awards for his country from his queen, and ended up with the highest award of Chief Logahu.
Yes, thank you, and I forgot that.
That's kind of... And they both kind of passed on at a similar time. It was like they knew each other because they kept interacting, which is a really weird thing to happen. You know, the Queen over here and he's over here. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Anna. Well, I should have mentioned it. I forgot. Thank you for reminding me this. So what happened was, my grandmother, who was not educated, but in the night, she would have those unusual dreams that in the morning, she normally tells us that she would see visions that Paraga would become someone important in the future, not in the context of the entire country, but in his tribe and in his district. And those were the visions that my grandmother saw. So when Paraga grew up, Paraga was a testament of my grandmother's vision. So when he grew up, he handled the politics of the area, and first he was he was elected to the former provincial government of the province. And not only that, but he was given some ministers, and he was there, and then he was appointed the council president of the district that where you come from. And after council president, he was appointed the deputy governor of the province. So we have 22 provinces, and the province in which Paraka and I come from is called Western Islands Province. So he was appointed the deputy governor. So all those happened as a result, or as a direct testament of my grandmother's vision that he saw. And what happened was, because of Paraka's unique and distinguished career, he was given a lot of awards. And the first award that was given to Paraka was in 1995. He was given the MBO, the Member of British Empire. That was the award that was given to Paraka by the Queen in 1995. And the second was in, the first was in 2000, and the second was in 2005. And then the greatest of all that was given to the Queen, to Paraka, was the Chief of the Grand Companion of the Order of Loku. And that was the last Chief of the Grand Companion of the Order of, of the Order of the Loku. That is the the biggest award ever to be given to a Papua New Guinean by the Queen. Thank you.
Great to witness this really wonderful exhibition of bright minds, storytelling, and I just loved coming last night. Thank you, Nancy, for the invitation. My question is, not a question, but I just wanted to put it out to my Papua New Guinean colleague writers. After I got Monty's book last night, I kind of felt a bit of sadness just going through and seeing what he has written. And then I felt that for Papua New Guineans, our history and our stories, we had our own stories of Adam and Eve. I mean, our legends and our stories that were told of times, immemorial. My question to the PNG writers is, do our stories go beyond, when the first white man came? Is it lost? Is there hope? How can we tell those stories and bring those stories to our young people? And is there a space that you can venture into and bring those story tumbunas back to our young people?
All right. Thank you, my sister. Like the challenge that we have right now, like in PNG, we have lots and lots of stories to be told. We have stories about the rivers, we have stories about the caves, we have stories about the mountains, we have stories about anything and everything. But the challenge is we don't write them down. That's where the problem is. We thinking about other things, but we forgot about preserving our history. That's one of the problems that we have. So if only, with a like-minded, if we could get a piece of paper, get an ink, and start putting it down now. If we could do that now, then the future generations would read and understand and appreciate what we are doing right now. And they might emulate what we are doing now. Because a lot of people, the young people, I'm appreciating a question. A lot of young people, they are resorting to Facebook and other social medias about writing things. But they forgot about writing things down in black and white and having it published. That's they forgot. So I appreciate the question, but the challenge is the challenge is they're not writing things down. That's the challenge that we have. But I think it comes with responsibility, commitment, and sacrifice as well. Because we may think that writing it's just it's just a blink of an eye, but no, it takes sacrifice, commitment, and time for a real person, for a real dedicated person, to come up with a complete book like this.
Can Baka share his thoughts on this as well?
Yeah, my other brother there, Mr. Bina, we work in the same department, so I believe he can say his thoughts on this. He wrote a lot of books. I wrote only one. And I believe he published one short story, but he has published a lot of other books which are not known. I think he will say his thought on this. We both of us from the islands. He's from the Eastern Islands, I'm from the Western Islands, so I believe he will say his thoughts on this as well.
You know, are you going to be here after lunch? Yeah. Barack Obama.
Yes.
Barack Obama is going to be here then. We have to have lunch soon because it's cooked. And just prior to that, we have a lot of people online waiting for the book announcements of this year's awards. And we would like to invite Monty and Andrea, if you would come up and join Paul to announce these names, the book manuscript awards. I'll come up now. Okay. So what we would like to do we have any other microphones we could pass around? What we would like to do, and we're running on Pacific time, everyone, so I don't need to apologise, because this island time, this is who we are. And that's just the way it is. And but there are people who have joined us live, and they're very keen, especially the authors, to find out those who have won the book manuscript awards for FNWF 2024. So if I could just hand the top page out, it's the same list, but if you would be kind enough to just read those, maybe, would you like to start, Paul? Or Monty, the first one?
So
that's fine, but maybe I should say this just in advance. We don't make the people of the Greater Pacific compete against each other to get an award. If their award is accepted by our judges, then they get not the same necessarily perfectly, and not the same comments from the judges always. But we're not running a competition. We're saying, is this book is it ready to go out with a little bit of editing, line editing? If it is, then it's accepted, and we offer to publish that book for them. So it's not a competition here at First Nations Writers Festival. We think all the voices should be heard if they're able to be published. Thank you for allowing me to contribute that comment.
Okay, the first book award goes to, the title of the book is Ani's Portrait, My String Bag Back Home by Julie Condi of Papua New Guinea. And the second to Farmer, the title of the book is Farmer Brings a Wife, Book 1 by Baka Bina, Papua New Guinea.
The third manuscript is Stunned by Light by Richard Napam from Papua New Guinea. And I Am the River by Helen Margaret Waka from New Zealand.
The fifth book award goes to Mr. Hanold Mundua, titled A Bride's Price from Papua New Guinea. And the last book award goes to Marlene D. Gray Portora from Bougainville in the autonomous from Bougainville in the autonomous region of Bougainville. And the title of the book is Remembering.
Thank you. Just in closing this part, we will announce the short story manuscripts after lunch. We're going to lunch. We have a fabulous lunch organised for everyone that's here. And, but I would like to say that people such as, well, one book and you get a prize, right? That was okay for you. But people like Baka Pina has been, as you said, writing for a long time, many books, recording the history of Papua New Guinea. Marlene writes a short story a day and is published all over the world, and we are so grateful that both of you who are here today have trusted us at First Nations Writers Festival. We love you for it, and you know, it's just wonderful that you've done that, and we will treat your work with huge respect and hopefully see you back next year so you can be here for the launch of your book. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. We have to go to lunch.
We'd like to welcome you back. I hope you had a nice afternoon break and maybe something to eat. I would like to start, first of all, with a short welcome, since we are just reconvening. So this dance is an ancient dance from Hawaii. It honors the god Kane. It's the only dance, the only hula existing from ancient times that is to this god. So, ke velina mai ne ke kini o lalo. Velina, ke velina mai ne ke kini o lalo. Na hoa o kauka na hele akahi. Akahi ka noho kaua I kaukahi. No kanei te papai lohia. Alau ka lohe lani. Api ilanila. Hai ala ea. Mauna o kane I ka aba. Ua ka uke ke hai ka ulunga. Ua hi o lani I ka moena. Ki paia e te tapa ka noe. Ka ho'opa akai. Haki ni launa. Hai ala ea. A e e. A e e. Hei noa no kane. Thank you. I just thought we're talking about tradition and ancestral knowledge and the stories. We come from oral traditions, but we're talking about how can we put what's appropriate on paper and share the knowledge so that when we pass, our future generations can know what we know instead of it being lost with our elders. So it's always a struggle, and I hear that dialogue, but I feel like we say na'au, in your gut, you will know if it's right to share or not. And you'll know that it's your right to share. So I'd like to start with this gentleman whose artwork, I think it speaks for itself. I love it. I bought a piece myself, so they are for sale. And it's great it's very rare when you can actually have the artist here to speak about their work, because just like writing it down, putting down, this is a story. This is the same thing. It's an oral tradition continuing in the now, but it still resonates with what the culture's about. And they say abstract, or but I don't think it's abstract. I think it's innovative, and I think our ancestors were just as creative. And this just shows firsthand. So I applaud Anna to adding that fabric and understanding that that the culture is alive in many different ways, in the hula, in our chants, in our stories and what we write down, and our art. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I give to you John Sakala Leben. You're welcome, sir. Yep.
I give credit to the writers, also the platform that Anna is creating for us to come here. As we have seen, most of the writers have spoken. We're actually writing something that's about where we come from, about the experience that we come from. And in all, we all have a story to tell. Okay. I'm the only artist in this, as far as the festival has come this far. It's a privilege to be here as an artist to show you what I create. It's in a visual form. A lot of the writers have spoken about what they've been writing about and the story behind their books. But I also have a story based on my journey as an artist, about where I come from and how it has taken me to come this far. I started art in 1997, just after college. And back then it was really hard to, live as an artist on the streets of Port Moresby. Around the time, our country was going down to a very, it's the worst part of the time that I finished art. And I had to look for ways to survive as an artist. It was in 1999 when the country went just below. Our currency went down to around 0.2 cents you can buy a kilo with. And around the time it was really hard, I began carrying my paint and brush around the streets of Port Moresby, trying to keep maintaining that fashion that I have, that skill that I had. I keep roaming until around 2002. There was a competition that came out to draw the queen. I took that as an opportunity. I didn't have much on me. I had the paint and brush with me. I kept the spirit alive. I had to give all my best I could. And not knowing that painting went on to win the first prize, which is now in the Queen's collection, somewhere in Buckingham Palace.
I'm sorry, it's somewhere now?
In Buckingham Palace.
In Buckingham
Yeah.
Palace, thank you.
Yeah. So I won the, I went for the Queen. When I won the award, the struggles and the pain that I was going through, it kind of gave way for me to strive better, to achieve more. And I was just painting, trying to make a living out of it until in 2005, I felt that living in Papua New Guinea was really hard, and we were trying to copy each other. What another artist was doing, I was doing what he's doing. To me, that wasn't creative enough. So I funded a trip to Europe with my own money. I went to Germany. When I was in Germany, I wanted to see what life is like outside of Papua New Guinea. I wanted to see what other people are doing. I wanted to be part of the happenings around the world. So when I went there, it was a new place, new people. Cultural-wise, it was hard for me to communicate with people out there. But I had some very good friends who used to sell my work in Germany. My agents who represent the Pacific art and all the stuff. So I went there. They took me on board. I paid for the airfare, but they took care of the meal and housing allowance, all the stuff. I had a couple of shows in Germany from the north, from Hamburg to Leipzig, to Nuremberg, to all these places. And then I went down, just because I'm from Papua New Guinea, and I'm from Morobe, which is the Lutheran Church first went to Papua New Guinea in Morobe. So when I was touring Germany, the Lutherans said that I was like a Papua New Guinean from Morobe. And to them it's like, we're very special. That's where the Mission Fest went to Papua New Guinea. So they took me on board. They excused my agents, and I was supposed to go for only 3 weeks, but ended up staying almost 8 weeks. Part of that was the Germans took me out, the mission people. They took me out and they brought me to all their little places. They are mission people, they have no money. They tried to help me to market my work in churches, in halls, everywhere they could. And it was good until towards the end of my stay. I went down to the southern part of Germany, in Bavaria. There I went to the Lutheran headquarters, and I had a show there. During the show, I met a guy from Berlin. He came along and he loved what I was doing. And then he goes and said, why don't you see something different? And I was like, open up to new challenges, new things. That was the whole idea. I went to Germany. So I said, well, what have you got to show me? And then he gives me a catalog of an artist from Venezuela. And this guy just, he does abstract art. He just pours the paint on the canvas, and then he stands back and have a look. If something's work out on that particular paint, he just goes and puts an eye or a nose or something, and then he creates it like a finished artwork. And I was like, wow. I said, this is different. Yeah. That's not art, but it's different. And to me, that spoke to me. That alone spoke to me. So I tried out for 2 weeks with him. Trying to do what he was doing. And I came back after the end of my stay in Germany. I came back to Papua New Guinea. And I tried out that, new style. Because Port Moresby is small. And so-called clients who used to buy our work, they know us very well, what we do and the style that we do. And they know us. So when I went, I produced, 5 small works, like some of those ones outside. I produced 5, and then it was like new kid in town. Something new, something different. And then I had the first people came and bought. Every time one person buys the work, he goes and shows it to his friends. Wow, where did you get this from? Oh, look for Sakale. Look for Sakale. Eventually, in a month or 2, I had the diplomatic missions like the American ambassador, Australian High Commissioner. All these big people start coming to my house. Hey, Sakala, we need a piece of you. Can you do us a commission work? We want this and that done. And then, in my first year, I would see difference in my income. It was good. And then eventually, it went out when, words kept going out. And then I ended up, getting more works from people. I travel here and there. I could probably talk to owners of companies. Before, I could only talk to maybe supervisors or managers. Now I deal directly with the CEOs of the company because of the work I do. Okay, having said that, thank you. I also try to paint about the happenings in our life. I believe art is a record of event in time. If you froze in time, if you keep the time steady, to me, I think it's that I'm capturing. I live at a very challenging time, and most of the things that I do, I try to record the happenings of today, because I believe it will be a history tomorrow for other people to come back and have a look. I just did recently. We had a setting that happened beginning of this year in Port Moresby. They call it the riot that happened. They got stores, everything burned down. And all other artists were doing their usual stuff, but I did record that event on that day. That painting I did was big, and I didn't realize how people are going to react to it. People just love it, and I put a price tag to it. There's no bargain to it. They pick it up. Now they're telling me to do second, third version of it. That's what I'm doing, but the idea is to record the moment through art. Basically, what I do also is I try to go back to nature, get inspiration from nature. Everything that happens around us, we draw our life back to the land that we come from. Because before we could survive on land, we don't need anything from the stores that we have now. We could survive on land. And I believe going back to nature is one thing that determines us and also relates us. We are so close with nature. In healing as well, even in our songs, music, dance, all of them are all related to nature. That's what we do. That's how close we are. And I believe We are connected, we are one. So most of my work is also based on that. I also believe in, like, for example, when I get married, my wife becomes part of me. And I'm a preacher in domestic violence. That's many things I do is like I paint about domestic violence because I lost my mom through that. And through my paintings, I try to portray, violence against women, not knowing that in doing so, I will capture the attention of the World Bank in America. So the ambassador back then in Port Moresby was a good friend of mine. She's a fan of my work that I do. And one time she called me up and said, Laban, would you want to take a trip? And I go, to where? To D.C., Washington, D.C. I said, put me on. And then she goes, we love your work. We have a seminar, we have a workshop dealing with domestic violence. 1 in 3 women around the world, they go through, violence. She told me, we love your work. You preach about it, so we want you to come over to America, to the World Bank, and, tell us more about what you do and all the stuff. So I flew over. I went into this, the World Bank headquarters in Washington, D.C. It's a glass building I went in. And I had to do what I love doing the best is like I paint like this on stage. And I basically paint about domestic violence. So the World Bank was really happy. They picked the thing out from me, the painting. So those are some things I do about in art, trying to record the moments in time, trying to do, like in this ones too, it's basically about Papua New Guinea. Going back to Papua New Guinea, we have 1,000 plus different cultures. I don't think I will live long enough to paint each and every one of those cultures, but I've tried to choose the best I could to present to you here. This is basically also about our land, our culture, as we are all related to nature. You can see the faces, you can see green, it's about nature, how we relate to nature. Yep, that's what I do. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Such a humble man, very, very, well, your paintings say a lot in itself, so they speak for itself. So thank you. Yes, okay, so let's move on, please. We have short stories.
It's for sale.
Yeah, oh yeah, okay.
Sorry,
yeah.
Just mention it.
Make sure the artwork is for sale. I bought one. So
Yeah, you did. You did.
I bought one. Like
well done, Peter.
I bought one last night. I think it's fantastic. There'll be a great addition to my global collection, but it's mostly Pacific Island. Yeah. So I'm very, very grateful for that addition. Thank you. But they are for sale, as are the books. I'm going to remind you that without your donations, without your support, this is not going to happen, not going to continue, so we need your support. Please do go to the website and make a kind donation. We appreciate it. All right, let's move on. We have short story VIP guests. Anna, are you going to introduce them for us?
Yes,
Okay, let's go.
Because I've read their stories too.
Thank you. So here we go, Anna.
It's me again. We have only 4 of our 2023 short story award winners here, and each story should be a book in its own right. It deserved the highest accolades. We are so grateful to receive these stories, and they're very accessible, by which I mean now people can go and see these short stories and read them, and it's very easy to do so. Now, we have 4 of those winners here today. We have Bakabina. Where are you? Aurelia Payne, who's over here. Marlene, who has just won this year's book award. And we have Paulini. Oh, there you are. Right, I was just running down all the photos thinking, who's here? Oh no, I forgot someone. Paulini from Fiji, who wrote a story that the judges called Pure Pacific Literature, or something like that. And, you know, it was amazing. Now, all the stories are wonderful. I'm not taking away from those, but by all means, what I'd like to do just before we get started, each person will come up and speak a little bit about their story, or maybe about writing in general, something like that, a little bit about themselves if that helps them tell their story about why they write. I think with art and writing, I was talking to Monty the other day, I think, and we were saying you're either a writer or you're an artist or you're a pilot. People have this passion ultimately and become that person if they're lucky. These people coming up today are writers. They might have other jobs, but they are passionate writers. Many of them are very senior in their country, in their literature, which isn't being published a lot around the world, and let's hope that explodes. But just before we go into speaking to them individually, I'd like to invite them up, and if they would announce the short story manuscript winners for today, because you won last year, and it's an honour, I think, to have you present the short story manuscript awards for this year. If the four of you would be kind enough to come up. Again, we don't have a competition between short story manuscript writers. The judges choose what they think should be awarded a prize, and then if they want to be, we publish them. This is last year's, a great read. Would you like to just come up? Oh, I think I put it up there. Just move down.
With height.
Oh, really? Well, what are you going to do when you're really famous and have to go up too high? Did I just put that up there? What did I do with it? Have I lost it? This is a Pacific festival, okay? I just had it. Oh. Yes, I'm going to take, because I'm the chairman, I'm going to take advantage of that. And I've only read one of the stories because the judges had a question about it. It's poetry. Now, we don't accept poetry. And this young lady said, I want to send in poetry. And I said to her, well, I'm not sure the judges accept poetry, but, you know, if we don't send it in, we'll never know, right? And she had the courage, good on her, to send in a poetry story, because they're all stories, called Pukuri, Riri. Means angry. How do you pronounce that? Pukuri, yeah. And it blew the judges out of the water. They just said, is all the Pacific, because they're not all Pacific, is all the Pacific poetry like this? I said, well, I don't know. You wouldn't accept poetry before. And they said, oh, no, we think we should have this lady on our list and see if she's prepared to publish with us. Her name is Mireia Raku from New Zealand. And it's the only one I've read, I'm sorry, because I've been a bit busy. And I'll read the others soon. But it just blew me out of the water as well. What an extra. We get such magnificent stories from people coming in. But you're now going to read the rest. I just wanted to announce that because we've broken our own rules. You know what it's like. This is the rule. If you just pretend it's not there, you can succeed. So there you go. Would you like to read the next two and then next one?
The next one is The Awakening by Julie Condi of Papua New Guinea.
Wow. That's twice. No, just cut that one. Would you like to do the next one?
Our next short story award winner is Measurements and Patterns by Kogara Hale of Papua New Guinea.
He won last year.
Our next award goes to Romney Tabara, A Tale of Two Crocodiles. Papua New Guinea.
The next one goes to another Bougainvillean with a bitter story of Maul, and it's none other than Maulin D. Gray Potaura. That's a full name.
And this is she right up here. Marlene, you pick the next one. There's two more, is there?
Yes. The next story award winner is Gina Igakusen, and she's from Papua New Guinea. And the story is Ravumo, Ceylon.
Would you like to do the next one?
And our last award winner is Willie Jr. Fafoi with the short story Lamawa, a girl from Kawi and Ngongosila. And he is from the Solomon Islands. Congratulations.
Wow! That's so exciting.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful.
So thank you. Would you like to stay up here, maybe sit on the stage? You may not want to. We did last year, didn't we, Marlene? We just sat down there. Yeah.
Pacific Way.
Pacific Way and talk to you. Is that okay?
Bring out the mat.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about these stories in this book, which is the last year's winners who have been published. And that's
better.
That's what we're going to do. Is that okay?
You see me everywhere because I'm a short story writer. And I've written so many stories I've lost count. And one of my stories, as we speak, is being published in New Zealand by by Lani and her, she...
Lani went.
Yes, Lani went. Yes, so she chose one of my stories, and it's a children's story. It's called Tunei. Tunei in my language is a rooster. All right, so she really liked it, and she got it. So as we speak, it's being published. Let me tell you a bit on the singing dogs of New Guinea. Actually, there are singing dogs in New Guinea, and if you hear them at night, they sound like banjos with the way they howl. Is that how you say it? Yes. So let me start like this. I watched somebody talk on like this person here. She said that we accumulate wealth. Like you can buy houses, you can grow wealthy, but in the next 50 or 100 years, nobody will remember you. All right? And that kind of really like shook me, like, because I believe in three things. You see? Somebody also said that we come from the stars. I'm talking in a legend, spiritual kind of talk that we islanders really believe in. So this person said that there are three ways that people occupy the earth. So one, they come from the stars. They're known as star seeds. The other one, they are brought to the earth by angels. All right, they are from that realm somewhere where angels bring them down here. The third kind of humans, they say, are from the earth. You know, they inhabit the earth because they are from here. And when you live on this earth, you will always feel something. And how I feel that I'm from the forest lands, you see. I always feel that if I am from earth, but not from any kind of earth, not from Iceland, not from the desert in Africa. I'm from the forest lands. I always feel a very big connection to the lands, you know, the forest, the rivers. So most of my stories, you will see, they are connected to the lands. They are connected to the trees. They are connected to the rivers, because I always feel that I'm from there, you see. When I live in Port Moresby, I surely miss my homeland, and I'm from that kind of environment where I grew up roaming the forest lands, you see. So most of my stories are based around there. So the Singing Dogs of New Guinea, I wrote here, is about connecting humans to, mostly I would say it's a very, not really like a ghost kind of story, but how we connect to animals as well, you see. So it kind of happened in Port Moresby, where this young boy keeps hearing dogs howling at night. And then they started sounding different. So him and his friends started following them, and then they encountered a totally different thing that they didn't expect. Right, and how I got the inspiration to write this story is from my homeland as well. Like at night, when we sit around fires, we usually hear dogs howling, and sometimes when these wild dogs howl, the domesticated dogs, they would curl up and they would go to sleep. Yeah, so that kind of, when I was growing up, it kind of put me. That there's something in the forests, you see, that even the domesticated dogs were afraid of, you see. And then it moved me on. My next story that Baka announced is even about the forest lands as well, on how if you are from that land, you connect to that land as well. And we are on a different land right now, you see, so we need to pay respect to the indigenous of this land. If you come to my homeland, you will have to pay respect to the people of my land. So that lady who said we only lived and we accumulate wealth and then when we go, it goes, I don't really believe in that, you see. We build for our ancestors, all right? We build for our ancestors. My ancestors, the ones who came before me, I carry their dreams, their legends through my stories as well. So I would connect that. I totally connect to the lands and the forest and the river. So most of my stories are around those lands and forests in Bougainville. Thank you.
Thank you, Maran. Mine was not a short story. It was an instruction out to indigenous people on how we can capture our stories. I wrote it in 3 languages. TALKFEST, which is what we call the language, and in the Creole, Papua New Guinea Tok-Pisin, and in English. And just explaining that we can be able to do that. I know there are nuances in English that you cannot capture in the language. There are things in the language that you cannot capture in the Creole language and in English. And there are differences that are very stuck and you cannot get, the meaning gets lost in the translation. But it's doable. So, and I've been practicing that for a couple of my stories. So I thought I'd put in, so it is an 800 word piece. It did not meet the 1,500 word requirement. And I just said, this is something, but when you multiply all 3 of them, that would have been going to 2,400, so I probably qualify for that. But no, it was not a short story, while the messaging was that, hey, it's something doable. I've talked about a writing, counting system that we had. We go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
And then 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it goes 5 is one hand, 10 is two hands or one stick. When you go to 20, both legs and the feet, then it goes 20, 2 plus stick or one rep. That's the equivalent, we've got the equivalent in the language. And then when you go to 50, it's a wing. Eh? And when you go to 100, it's a nose.
2 wings,
no? It's a nose. When you go to 200, it's a billum. And when you go 1,000, it's a pile of things. So we had that. And so the Roman numeral thing came in and made simplified things for everyone, but our counting system are going to be lost. And so it's in that story about talking about cow and what infidelity that happens in the village over somebody trying to try out their luck on another woman that's a married woman. So in trying to do that, I've tried to explain that what happens in the village. So basically, that was that. But the message out to Pacific, to the First Nation people is that we can be able to capture our stories in our language, in the Creole language that we all have, and in English. It's doable. So that was my message to everyone. For this book here.
Thank you. I think by doing that and being published, it was after that that you were invited to speak on exactly that point, capturing your local dialect or language in Vanuatu.
No, that was on a different...
yeah, okay. But it's a passion of yours.
Yeah, I went to Vanuatu with Pauline and I wanted to... They got me there to speak about writing stories, Papua New Guinea stories, Pacific stories, but I think let's not take the what out from this. I can speak back after that. Let's talk. Both of them have wonderful stories, and I don't want to.
You really want to sit here? Can you sit here? I don't want to sit here.
Sorry, Anna. It's my legs.
Okay, yeah.
Because my skin is short.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yes. So Aurelia wrote a wonderful story, which, when you first start reading it, as I think Parker said before, they don't kind of write in specific stories, just don't go, well, here's the beginning, you identify everyone, then you've got a middle, and it all happens there, and then it's got an ending, which is the mainstream. This story takes you on a journey, and you don't really kind of get it, do you, until the very end. That was my feeling, yeah.
That's a nice compliment.
I was sorry, I mean that in a very positive way, because it's deeper, it's deeper, broader, has a lot more in it than others. So thank you for that. Would you like to talk to your story?
Thank you, Anna. Amazing effort. I've enjoyed myself. Honored to be in the presence of such great minds, creative writers, artists, all of you, and the other story writers in that edition. Thank you. As I mentioned last night, I won't repeat that again, but I just wanted to add that if you go through the story, you'll see that there's a bride price. It's the journey of a young woman in my society that goes through the tattooing, getting her ready, then she gets to, go through that. Anyway, I just wanted to add.
More, because it's go through it just quickly. Don't,
Yeah, I was trying not to repeat that.
Oh,
all right. So, yes. Okay. Anyway, the tapa markings and the tattoo markings on the face of women from Tufi. If you Google Tufi tattoos, that tradition is dying out because a lot of the young women do not want to have facial tattoos when they go into the high schools, universities, modern world. So that's dying. But the relationship between the body art and the tapa art that they wear and then into puberty. They have to do that as markings. I called it the atlas of their family. They carry that through life. Then the bride price is the format through which networks are built between families, clans, tribes, and communities. And that's why it was important that that happened through marriages, so they could build, extend that lineage. That girl carried that tattoo and on the tapa that she wore into her life, and she passed it on onto her children, nieces, granddaughters. And as I was explaining to Monty, the whole process is very spiritual. It's bonding the women, and that's how they kept together to do all the things that they needed to do for the sake of the community, as part of the community. So that's what I tried to explain in this. But I'm really happy and excited that I've come here and got such a good response from you and from Monty. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. So for me, going forward is, how am I going to expand that story? That's why I asked about the writer's block. If you're going to put that into a novel, how do I carry that story forward? That kind of thing. So my takeaway from here would be, how do I expand that short story into a long story, into a book? Yeah. So that's what I'd like to do.
Well done. Thank you. Oh, Paulini, I was just thinking, where's the other one? She's there. She's wearing the brightest dress and very beautiful dress today. Paulini from Fiji, who wrote the magnificent story, I hope I pronounced the name correctly, Tobe, which she will tell you about. It's absolutely stunning. The judges were, everybody's stories were stunning. We're not trying to differentiate, but this one just seemed to capture the judges. Would you like to come up and tell us about your story, Tobe?
So when I was 6 years old, my father was posted as a diplomat to Belgium, serving in the Fiji embassy. So we moved into our new house on Edelweiss-land, and at that time, the youngest wasn't born. There was only me, my older brother, and my younger sister. So we would go and scout out the house and see what the old tenants had left behind, which were previous employees of the Fiji embassy. And so we didn't find much, but we did go into the garage, and we found an empty ice cream container full of little toys, figurines. And at that age, toys are a treasure. You literally dug up treasure. And so we kind of fought over it, but I called dibs on it first because I found it. But you have to share. And I thought, no, I don't want to share, until I found rolled up newsprints. And it was old and yellowed. That was the first time I saw newsprint. I didn't know it wasn't supposed to be yellow. It was yellow because of its age. And I saw it, and I thought, oh my goodness, I can make millions and millions of books out of this. So I compromised, and I said, sure, I'll share the toys, but I'm not sharing the newsprints. So I took the newsprints, I cut it up, I folded it into pages, I bound the spine with sellotape, and I started writing my stories there using colored felt tip pens and pictures. And if I remember correctly, the first story would be just about a circus. And out of the blue comes this old woman, hobbled over with a dirty cloak, and everyone's astounded because she's not impressive. But then she swings off her coat, and she's this magnificent trapeze acrobat, and she does the most magnificent show, and everyone cheers for her. And I guess the obsession of writing never stopped since then. But then I'm also here because I have an unsubstantiated theory call it a hypothesis, and it's that perhaps every writer is writing because maybe they faced some sort of trauma in their lives. If you were like me, who obsessed over writing, who knew she wanted to be a writer as early as 6, 7 years old, maybe you went through a trauma. And this isn't a therapy session, and I'm not here to present a research paper, so don't contest. Right? So don't contest me on these claims. But think about it. If you are a writer, or maybe any form of artist, was there something in your life that was so profound that maybe you kept hidden? And so perhaps as writers, we're sort of secretive, and as much as we come up with new names for our characters, new situations, and as much as we want to hide ourselves and not be in the limelight, most of the times, little bits of ourselves appear in our work. And it's not for us to tell. Perhaps it's for you to speculate on and guess. And maybe now I'll come away from the individual trauma and ask ourselves, is there such a thing as a collective trauma? I don't even know. I didn't take psychology, so someone can correct me. But if I was going to go along that thread, collective trauma, I'd like to call it colonization. You see, I'm not proud to say that I can write a text between a friend of mine, maybe a formal letter, in my native tongue, Vasapakapiti. But if you ask me to write a full-length short story or a novel, you'd think I wasn't Fijian. You'd think that's not my mother tongue because I can't. And so we have sitting here those who write in their mother tongue. And you should be proud of yourself. And I think as an Indigenous person, that's something that we should all aspire to be. And that's also why I decided to create a small publishing house called Kulawai Press. Before I explain about Kulawai Press, I wanted to ask if you've heard that unsaid rule called don't send an email when you're angry. Write it out. Don't press the send button, press the delete button. So I guess I wrote an article after I went to Hawaii last year for an East-West Center fellowship, and I was attached with Best Press, a publishing house there, and so they wanted me to write about my experience. And perhaps I was channeling a bit of anger in that, so I'm going to read an excerpt from it, and so this is the email that was not sent, so it stays within this room. Okay, so just about Kulawai Press. Okay. So Kulawai became for me a name symbolic of the state of affairs of publishing in Fiji. The Kulawai, or red-throated lorikeet, is an endangered bird endemic to Fiji. Its last reported sighting was on Fiji's main island, Vitilevu, on Mount Tomanivi, Fiji's highest mountain. Like the Kulawai, writing as a movement and a tool for community building and artistic expression makes its appearance in unpredictable waves that reach its height before an extended period on the ebb. Like the Kulawai, the writing movement's next appearance is elusive and unpredictable. There are those of us, like the dedicated birdwatchers and conservationists, who hold out hope that producing consistent, ever-evolving local literature is not extinct. And just as the Kulawai is endemic to Fiji, so can the revitalization of the literary movement in Fiji only come out from the Fijian people. This movement must extend beyond ticking literacy checkboxes. To think that an improvement in literacy on the backs of non-Fijian literature is good enough is a lazy means to an end that venerates a capitalist agenda, often masking a colonized mindset that dictates what modern success should look like and values a different set of standards. It is an insult to the Fijian intellect. Moreover, it suppresses our ability to flesh out, create, build, and rebuild the collective psyche of what it means to be Fijian. And I don't say these things in total disregard of the strides made by writing doyens of the past on whose shoulders I stand on and of whom I will speak about shortly. So when I came back from Hawaii, we went on this, we held our first writing workshops for young people. And so I write about it here, and I say, it is a hope for a third, more vibrant and sustainable wave that urged Peter and I to go and spark an interest and incubate writing from today's young writers. We hold out hope that Fijian children can grow up seeing themselves represented in books way before they enter higher education. And that's something that I didn't grow up with. I read Enid Blyton books, Sweet Valley High, those kind of books. And I'm very grateful for that experience, though. So the first exercise our workshop participants undertook was to write about their motivation to write. Needless to say, we were very impressed by the young writers and all the more encouraged to publish them. In hearing the participants, one of them said, I have 10,000 stories flying around in my head. I hope to write 10 of them in my lifetime. So in hearing the participants, one thing became distinctively obvious. These young Fijian writers grew up around the same books. Heidi, Sweet Valley High, The Babysitters Club, and works by Enid Blyton, Roald Dahl, R.L. Stein, yet neither did anyone look back fondly on the stories they read as mandatory reading in high school. I Heard the Owl Call My Name, The River Between, The Silent One, The Village by the Sea, books that share cultural similarities to ours, but not Fijian nonetheless. I was reminded of a conversation over lunch with Dipna. We had just delivered book orders to Kailua Elementary on the beautiful, charming windward side of Oahu. Children become stewards and custodians of what they read, said Dipna as we enjoyed pepperoni pizza and Caesar salad at California Pizza Kitchen. It begs the question, what are Fijian children being custodians of? Another history, another culture, another language, another worldview. There is no need to send an army to invade our country if we can do it through books. In Hawaii, I became reacquainted with the work of political activist and educator, Professor Hunani K. Trask, Tambusakeani. Her work in pursuit of sovereignty and self-determination of Hawaiians was transformational and empowering. How unfortunate that my nation, as a sovereign state, can be described as annexed in a different way. Yet publishing can be a powerful tool for decolonization or reorientation. Publishing for me has taken on a form of resistance to the colonization of our minds, the devaluing of our language, the competition from social media for our attentions that quickly dwindles from one dopamine shot to another of mind-numbing entertainment. We can reclaim the sovereignty of our minds through the decolonization of our stories, our books. So in the late Epeli Hauafa's essay, Our Sea of Islands, the social anthropologist and writer speaks of great Melanesian leaders like Walter Lini of Vanuatu and Bernard Narokobi of Papua New Guinea, who made great effort to rehabilitate their cultural identity by cleansing it of its colonial taint and denigration. What if we could rehabilitate our culture through the books that we write? And what if the books that we write become the cogent evidence that our culture is being rehabilitated? And that's what we're doing here today. And I am so blessed and so humbled and so honored to share this space with you all. And if you want to read my story, you can buy the book, like Peter said, in support of the First Nations Writers Festival. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I've got the 19-point paper that I wanted to edit, but the same story, the same what is there. I'm writing stories about my Goroka culture, about my people, about my land, and I cannot write about Fiji. I cannot write about Morobe, and I cannot write about Hawaii. I've got to write my own stories. The whole of Pacific, in Papua New Guinea, we've got 860 languages. In one of those languages, we may have 5 or 6 dialects. The north of that village, the north of that language group would have characters and things that would be totally different from the south of that language group, even at the same language. We've got all the subtleties that we got. So it's 860 plus in Papua New Guinea, 776 in West Papua, 32 in East Timor, around about 3,000 in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islands. You've got in Fiji, now they've got one central language, but you've got different languages there, different groups. You've got Vanuatu and Solomon Islands. So we've got a wealth of stories to be told. And I've said this repeated time and time again, we've got the ability to have around about 1,500 stories published a year. Let me repeat that again. We've got the ability to produce short stories, 1,500 a year. Now, if we have 2 or 3 stories from each of those language groups, and you multiply that by the number of years that we can be able to produce, that's mind-blowing. I just went into West Castle this morning, and I went through the bookshelf there. There's nothing about the Torres Strait and Aboriginal books on the shelf there. In New Zealand, you've got a lot of publishers, and I know that there's a lot of Polynesian stories, Maori stories that you publish in, which is good. But for Papua New Guinea, we have jilts. We've got nothing. And it's things like this that give us the opportunity. But this is 8 of last year's story. It's not the 860 that we're looking for. Yeah. So we need to get out there and write our stories. I'm doing my bit. Let me repeat again. I'm doing it for my language group and for my people. I cannot write about, let me repeat again, the Bougainvilleans. I cannot write about them. We've got to have a Bougainvillean writing about that. And in Bougainville, there's around about 36 languages on that mainland alone. So they've got 36 stories that they can produce in 1 year. And that's here in this book, we've got only 8. They've got an ability to produce 36 books, 36 short stories. So we've got the wealth and resources. Our stories are not the same. I don't have a sea in my place, so I don't know what canoe riding is like, or jumping into a sea is like, or going down diving and catching a turtle. I don't know. I have no ability of that to tell that story. The people on the coast need to get up and write that stories, capture it. Even in the highlands, I've got subtleties. I live in the plains. I've got kunai patches, this grass land. I've got patches and little gullies that I'm roaming around, mud patches. Up in the mountains, they've got trees and rocks and fast-flowing rivers and waterfalls. I don't have that, so I cannot write about waterfalls in my stories. Somebody needs to do that for us. So for the First Nation writers people, we need to get up and start identifying, hey, what stories do we need to tell, and who's going to write it for us?
And then write it.
And then write it. We're not going to have Stevenson come in to stay at and write about Robinson Crusoe and Cinderella and all of that, living on our island, on our place, and writing about things that happen over there in stories in Europe. We need to rise up and get. So that is my message in my language, is that I realized that. And this is the sad part of me. My grandfather was a trader he knew Engan language from Goroka. He could speak Engan, and that's run about 4 weeks walk from where we are, through enemy territories, and he could speak that language. I know only 4 of that's my mother tongue, mother's language, Tokpisin and English. Tokpisin and English I could discount. If you counted it, I would know only 2 languages. My grandfather knew 11. My father knew 7 of that. His brother knew 7. And I got angry when our Iceland friend and the Maori friend were talking to their relatives, their grandparents. And I got angry with myself and I walked out because I couldn't contain the anger in me, saying that I lost the opportunity to talk to my relatives, my grandparents. They died and they've gone. I'm the 13th in my tribe, in my village. and I know nothing of my traditions. And I know that 9 or 10 in there know nothing of it because we grew up away from the village. We've got white hair now and we've come back to the village and we know nothing about it. So where are those, who's going to tell our stories? I'm not telling any historical stories. I'm telling contemporary stories about what I was doing in my time and getting all those snippets of oral tradition infused into those modern stories. So the agency and the need for writers to rise up in the Pacific, in the First Nation people to write up and capture their stories is there. It's unique. It's not the same as the rest of the world. We don't tell it the same way. We don't start have a beginning and where you build it up and then you have a climax and a conclusion. That's not our way of telling the stories. We're trying to explain how a rock is in the middle of the forest, or why a certain type of tree is growing in that area, or why there is a waterfall in that place. And we tell a story on how people went and did it. So it's spirits and people that went and put those places. And there are some nuances. You cannot name the spirits, so how do you go about doing that? You cannot name the grandfathers. So those are things that we need to work out and tell that. So our message in capturing this, and there's very few of us writing our stories, we need to go out and tell the world, the First Nation people, that there's a lot that we need to do. The message in Pauline's mentioned something about it. Aurelia has mentioned about, sorry, my sister from Poponeta, nobody's going to tell the Poponeta stories. You need to go and find people who can be able to do that. The Morobe stories, while you're doing good artwork here, you need to go and tell the Morobians to get it. The Maori and the Polynesian people don't rely too much on Albert Wendt. So he's writing good stories up there, and I like his stories, but he's one of, how many, 400, 1 million people in Polynesia and Maori. We need to capture this, because each of the islands and each of the places have their own stories. And it's unique from, like I said, one group of in my language group, one group of the people who live on the other side, speak the same language, but who live on the other side of the mountain, have a totally different story from that area, and their stories don't relate to my side of the world, at the other end of the world where we live in the plains. So different stories, same language group, but different scenarios and what experiences. So I hope that you can do. I've just contributed, but I write stories, Google my name, and you can find my stories there. I've written 9. I've got the manuscripts out there, and I'm telling people that, hey, listen, we can be able to write our stories. If you're having difficulty in capturing the tradition, in this book, I've shown you how to do it. You can be able to go and write your stories. It's doable. There are subtleties, like for music. In one of my manuscripts, I've wanted to talk about the tune of the language and the tone of the language, and how do you... I don't have that in my talk place. But we have this, we play these panpipes, and the music goes over, and people can talk to each other by playing panpipes, and they can be able to talk to each other. Just for young lovers, that they talk by bamboo panpipes, and they try to go and meet. But how do you talk about tones and tunes and stanzas and choruses and verses? We don't have it in our language. We just say, sing him Sinsinta Solna. It's a song that you sing on the bamboo panpipe. So how do you translate it? It's difficult, but we can be able to write about them. Thank you.
I grew up with Goldilocks, I swear. You know what? That's the first book award I got. And we got it in Papua New Guinea in grade 1. And it's in Papua New Guinea, grade 1. And I was a great reader, so you kind of knew I was going to be a reader my whole life. And in my career, I used to have to write 4 foolscap pages a day of original text. Business days, let's call that, with a couple of days of travelling when I didn't do it, 200 days a year. By 4 is 800 A4 pages a year, year after year. And on top of that, I did 20, 30, 40, 50, 100-page reports where I'd go and do the research and write more original information. So I know a little bit about writing. I was talking to Monty before, and when he was giving his speech, and he said he had periods being unable to write and to get out there and to have people look at your work, and then that stimulates you, and suddenly you're writing every day like a mad thing. You know, it is. There's no question it is like that. But from what Barker was saying, every day, a few sentences. Julie Jansen, one of the most prestigious Indigenous authors published here in Australia, said last year at our festival that sometimes it's just a few sentences a day. She interviewed Marlene, remember? We've got that on our website page, that YouTube. So everyone can do it. Getting back to what Barker, you were saying, we only need how many thousand? 18,000? Is that what you said? 1,800 stories every year from all the dialects. And we can start to capture some of the history. We can't handle that. Don't send them all to us. But there will be increasingly more and more people who are taking these stories and publishing them. And I'm so excited about that. So thank you. These...
Sorry, I just said, a lot of people say they don't have time to write, but I keep on telling people that the shortest word in the Bible is 2 words. Jesus wept. And that is a lot of words. So we all have short sentences, 2-worded sentences in our languages, in our WhatsApp. So we can be able to relate it to something that's still also. Remember that you can write a sentence that is 2 words and that will capture meaning and context.
Absolutely. I'm completely with you. You just 2 words will capture a lot, and eventually 2 becomes 20. So we're going to draw to a close with Peter, but before we do that, Peter, sorry, I'm going to introduce some new things. Our cultural ambassador for First Nations Writers Festival is Nancy, who is up the back. She has been with us from the very first day, and she wanted to come along and just say a few words. She and I travelled around Melanesia last year. You can imagine she's a lovely, quiet, polite woman. And then there was me. But we had a wonderful time. We're still great friends. So I'd like to introduce her. Just to say a few words. I should have let you know before we go. Nancy? You're allowed to stand up. You don't have to sit down. I'm old.
And before all of you, I've always wanted to write a book, and you people are an encouragement to me to do that. All right. Thank you, Anna, for making First Nations Writers Festival possible, and for having all my Wantoks here across the Pacific, and for making it possible for them to have a book written and being authors. It's actually a name tag. It would be like a name tag to me, and something that I would take pride in. To be able to write a book of my own and be seen as an author. And all the way from Iceland, thank you for coming. And I am here today as the cultural ambassador, wanting to share my culture in Papua New Guinea with you people, especially our visitors that came from that came from afar. Now, if you check First Nations Writers Festival page, you would see me talking about the Bilum. This is a Bilum. Our ancestors did not write books, right? They painted, they weaved, and this is a story. So if you see a boy going to a school with a laptop in his back and going to university, he's actually carrying cultures and traditions from his great-great-great-great-grandparents passed on to them, sending them with blessings to go and do well in school. So this is actually a story. And this one, it's kind of, if somebody in Papua New Guinea gives you a bag, it means you're treasured, you're loved, you're welcomed. It can be used for peacemaking ceremony, intermarriages. When two tribes are fighting, they can make peace with this one. Bride price is when a young girl gets married to another, everything. So if a boy is courting a girl, and if the girl's family or boy's family give a bilum to a girl, that means she's accepted already. So it's got a lot of stories with it. Now today, I have a few to give to our friends that came from afar. I'd like to ask 2 from New Zealand, 2 from Iceland, and 1 from Hawaii. We'll take a piece, not of, I wouldn't say Papua New Guinea, I would say the Pacific Island, because the culture is almost the same. This is, you come too? This is for you, for your phone, and for your key tag. Can go in there. Now for you, give the same to the 2 guys, yeah? A bit of culture. This is my people's story. Like he said, well over 800 different languages. That's a story right there. That's a book right there. So when you go to Iceland, this is authentic. The colors are even natural. This comes from the river people in the Pacific, and it represents the net. It's a kind of, their living and livelihood depends on fishing in the sea, and it's like a net that they would use.
From the sea, near the sea.
Yeah, the Pacific River. So that's your bag. This is yours. The colors are authentic, they're natural, and that's yours. And this is a story for you to take to Hawaii.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's with love from First Nations Writers Festival, Anna Bozi, and myself, and the team to you.
Yeah. Cultural ambassador.
Thank you.
I was carried in a big field by my mother and my aunties, and they passed on the knowledge and the warmth, the embrace of that past.
One final thing. We launched a magnificent book last night from Paul Pirini, which is selling well, and we really haven't done a huge amount of marketing. We're still getting to that step for all the books, but we have sold all our books, so you know, on every continent. Not the islands, because postage is so difficult. So next time you come over, Monty, we're going to give you a big bag full of books to take back overseas. But we are sold through shops from London to all over Germany, to Scotland, to US, and also online. So people can get our books. Now, we've been talking today amongst the authors about doing e-books. So you don't make any money out of e-books, but if that's what they want overwhelmingly to do, we will do that. We don't make any money out of these either. What's that? So, what are you doing? What are you putting in there? But what I would like to tell you about was one of the most amazing books I read last year, which was sent in by a Papua New Guinean. He sent his manuscript in, and it's the second in a series, but this stands on its own. And it's a thriller, but it's also mythical, and it's like all those movies that I never go and see anyway, but I've read about them, that are winning awards around the world right now, that have all the myths of First Nations people around the world. But this is just better, because it's unadulterated, and it is an incredible story. It's fast-paced. It absolutely, the structure of the millions of books I think I've read in a lifetime is one of the best I've ever read. His structure of how he put it together is magnificent. And the fast-paced action, I remember about halfway through I got an action scene. I can't tell you what it is. You're going to have to buy the book. I got to an action scene. I thought, God, this is good. You know, you just don't read this because it was so perfect. You were actually in that fighting across the creek and the arrows, and you kind of, while you're reading the book, you're pulling your arrow out, waiting to get the guy over there in front of you. It is absolutely magical, and he couldn't be here because getting here from places like Papua New Guinea and sometimes Fiji and other places, getting the visas quickly and the passports quickly is very difficult. And so he didn't get his till late on Friday night. And what a tragedy for him, because this is his first award. So we're going to try and compensate him in some way to maybe bring him over and have interviews and things like that, and put that out on our website, which isn't the same as having him here to meet all of you, but I do, and you know, have the debates about writing and everything else. He's got a third book on the way, but I highly recommend, if you have an opportunity, this is the ride of your life. It is absolutely fantastic, and it deserves, more than deserves, the humble award we gave him, and I'm sure it will one day, you'll be watching it up there for $1 billion in some movie that I won't go and see because I've read the book. I've read the book. So John Curry from Papua New Guinea, congratulations. We admire your literary style and we wish you were here, but we will see you soon. Thank you.
Well, I think we have come to that place. It's amazing, even the short story, the people that wrote those stories, they had so much to share. And right there, we know already that you all are going to make your novel. And we know that you can do it, and we'll stand behind you. So, I mean, at Peleoalpha, I taught at the University of South Pacific, at the Oceania Center of Arts, Culture, and Pacific Studies. He was a visionary, and he really changed my thinking. And we talk about feeling colonized. As a Hawaiian, I came to Fiji not knowing anything, and I left Fiji knowing so much firsthand from the actual people. And it was life-altering. And it really made me realize how much I did not know about the Greater Pacific, about Oceania. And I used to use those words, Polynesia, Micronesia, and Melanesia, and I don't anymore because Epeli was totally against those words because they were about color. And so I say Oceania or Pacific Island. And, you know, I learned a lot from the Itoke. And they were brilliant. They had the fastest ships around. You know, the Drua was amazing. I'm very proud of the Hawaiians that brought back the whole the canoes, and you know, telling those stories. And everyone that tells the stories, good on you. Inspire the young ones to do it, and keep up, fight the good fight. And everyone has to tell a story. I love that you were saying, I can't tell your story. I shouldn't. You should tell your story. So thank you, Anna. Thank you to the First Nations Writers Festival. And we hope we see you next year. And in Hawaii, we start traditionally and we end traditionally.
O vale noe hele noa noa ke ale hele nea noa papa noa
Mama is done. Thank you, everyone. Aloha.